Chapter 741. Old monster, do you think my master is a match for that two-palace immortal lord? Yu Qianqiu asked, looking in the direction whereby Changchun had disappeared. Based on his current cultivation level, to be honest, it will be difficult. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked up at the sky and said, actually, you don't have to worry. Since the heaven and earth Qinquan array can't trap your master, he should have no problem escaping. At least Yi Xiao and Ji Wu won't be able to chase him out of the array. Forget it, the old man asked for it. Yu Qianqiu muttered. He put away the two treasures in his hands and quickly flew down the mountain. He scuttled into the collapsed forest and searched around. Immortal Lord Crocodile was curious about what he was looking for. When he found a bracelet in the grass, he realized that this guy was looking for the storage bracelets that those people had lost. Not long after, Yu Qianqiu flew back to the top of the mountain with a dozen bracelets in his hands. He used his divine sense to check them one by one. After looking through them, Yu Qianqiu's expression did not look too good. There was nothing in them. Other than some that he did not recognize, there were pitifully few spirit stones left. They were not even as many as the spirit stones in the bracelet of the Immortal World's envoy on the Immortal Ascension platform. Logically speaking, this was impossible. The envoy's level was obviously lower than these people. Old monster, I don't know if I'm blind, but can you help me see if there is anything valuable in these bracelets? Yu Qianqiu stuffed the bracelets into his hands. Immortal Lord Crocodile was stunned, but he still checked the contents of the dozen or so bracelets and found that there were indeed very few items. Apart from a few decent immortal artifacts, there was really nothing valuable. He thought for a while and understood what was going on. He returned the bracelets to Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, of course there is nothing valuable, but the quality of the immortal artifacts inside is not bad. If it was in the immortal world, it would be worth some money. But in the human world, it might not be worth the price it should be. Yu Qianqiu put away the bracelet. He had no intention of selling the immortal equipment in the cultivation world. If these immortal equipment were to be sold to the cultivation world, it would simply be looking for trouble for himself. Frowning, he said, you said that it's inevitable that there's nothing valuable. Why do you say that? The consumption of spirit stones by immortals is far greater than that of mortal cultivators. After being sealed here by the heaven and earth cosmos formation for more than 100,000 years, they must have used up almost all the things that could be consumed. Even if there are spirit stone mines on this continent, I reckon that there will be too many people and not enough meat. Everyone will not be able to eat their fill, Immortal Lord Crocodile said with a smile. I see. Yu Qianqiu sighed and shook his head. I wanted to make a fortune from them, but I was happy for nothing. Immortal Lord Crocodile asked casually, why? Are you short of spirit stones? Yu Qianqiu would never tell others that he was rich. Instead, he liked to complain about being poor. He replied subconsciously, I'm poor. I'm poor. Immortal Lord Crocodile paused for a moment, and then said solemnly, I still have some spirit stones with me. If you really need them, I can give you some. Yu Qianqiu, who had asked casually, was stunned. His eyes lit up as he said, you have it. How many do you have? Immortal Lord Crocodile checked his storage bracelet and said nonchalantly, not much, just about 400 million divine grade spirit stones in total. How much? Yu Qianqiu quickly dug his ears, thinking that he had misheard. He asked expectantly, you said that you have 400 million divine grade spirit stones. Did you say it wrong, or did I hear it wrong? Are you sure it's 400 million divine grade spirit stones, not 400 million high grade spirit stones? Nonsense, my cultivation hasn't fallen to the point where I can't even see clearly. Of course it's 400 million divine grade spirit stones. Immortal Lord Crocodile said firmly. Yu Qianqiu shuddered at these words, and he walked towards Immortal Lord Crocodile with trembling hands. The expression on his face was as detestable as it could be. Immortal Lord Crocodile stared at him and said solemnly, "Brat, what's wrong with you?" Yu Qianqiu hugged Immortal Lord Crocodile's waist, burying his head in Immortal Lord Crocodile's arms as he wailed, "Old monster, from today onwards, you're my master. You're 2F** King Rich." Scram! Immortal Lord Crocodile bellowed. He had never been hugged like this by a man for so long, and goosebumps rose all over his body. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't let go no matter what? He shook his head and said, "You're too rich, you're not human. You're a god in my heart. You're my god of wealth. Hugging you is the same feeling as hugging money." Immortal Lord Crocodile was taken aback. This guy was excited because of money. He said solemnly, "If you want spirit stones, just say it. Don't be so disgusting. Say it. How much do you want?" Yu Qianqiu loosened his grip, revealing a pitiful expression as he weakly stretched out a finger. Immortal Lord Crocodile's face darkened. "You really dare to ask? With your current cultivation, do you think you need so many spirit stones?" After saying that, he reached out and pulled the storage pouch from Yu Qianqiu's waist. He casually glanced at it and was immediately taken aback. He looked at Yu Qianqiu suspiciously, wondering why this fellow had an empty storage pouch on him. Where did he put those things just now? He didn't think too much about it, and directly took out a pile of shiny black spirit stones from his bracelet and put them into the storage bag. Then, he threw the storage bag back to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu's hands trembled as he picked up the storage bag and examined it. It would have been fine if he hadn't taken a look, but when he did, he was shocked. There was a huge pile of shiny black spirit stones in the storage bag. There were actually 100 million divine-grade spirit stones inside. Yu Qianqiu thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. He shook his head and looked at the storage bag again. But the truth was the truth. No matter how he looked at it, there were 100 million divine-grade spirit stones inside. Yu Qianqiu's eyes widened, and he staggered several steps back as if he was struck by lightning. He couldn't believe it. He had wanted to ask Immortal Lord Crocodile for 1,000,000 divine-grade spirit stones, but the other party misunderstood and gave him 100 million, 100 times more than what he wanted. Oh my God! A divine-grade spirit stone was worth 100 million high-grade spirit stones. How many high-grade spirit stones was 100 million divine-grade spirit stones worth? Damn it, I can't calculate it. In any case, I'm rich. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Huang Xiaolong's behavior and scolded, "What the hell are you doing?" Yu Qianqiu regained his senses and hurriedly stuffed the storage bag into his robe, sending it back to Utopia. He was afraid that the old man would go back on his word. In any case, now that the storage bag was in his hands, he wouldn't return it even if he was beaten to death. With an astronomical amount of wealth in his hands, Yu Qianqiu felt comfortable all over. He no longer had to worry about being unable to support a woman. Patting his chest, Huang Xiaolong felt more confident. He cleared his throat and looked at Immortal Lord Crocodile, asking curiously, "How did you get so many divine-grade spirit stones? Were you in charge of the Immortal Emperor's finances? What nonsense are you talking about? How can a mere 400 million divine-grade spirit stones be considered a lot? If it was in the past, Jin Miao would have been able to take it out. There were many people in the immortal world who could take out 400 million divine-grade spirit stones. These are just the ones I carry around with me. I think it wouldn't be a problem to take out 10 billion divine-grade spirit stones from my immortal palace." Immortal Lord Crocodile's expression dimmed as he sighed. "If I had known this would happen, I would have brought more with me. Now, I'm afraid they've all become someone else's wedding dress." Yu Qianqiu finally understood. If Immortal Lord Crocodile hadn't been suppressed at the bottom of the lake for so many years without anyone knowing, the spirit stones in his bracelet wouldn't have been left behind until now. However, he was still shocked by the wealth of the celestial world. People at different levels had a different understanding of wealth. Immortal Lord Crocodile's wealth alone was enough to rival the entire cultivation world. The immortal world is indeed the immortal world, there are so many spirit stones. You're wrong. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head. In fact, the place with the most spirit stones isn't the immortal world, but the netherworld. Whether it's the vastness of the land or the reserves of spirit stones, the netherworld has the most spirit stones. To the netherworld cultivators, spirit stones are useless to their cultivation, so very few people mine them. At the same time, the netherworld emperor strictly controls the mining of spirit stones. His main purpose is to prevent large amounts of spirit stones from falling into the hands of the immortal world cultivators to strengthen the immortal world. Of course, there are times when the netherworld uses spirit stones to trade with the immortal world. Secondly, the various feudal vassals in the netherworld secretly mine spirit stones to trade with the immortal world. This is also the main channel through which spirit stones from the netherworld flow to the immortal world. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The netherworld, which originally gave people a sense of horror, now made him yearn for it. He really didn't mind having more money. Instead, he felt that the more money the better, because he firmly believed that money made things easier. However, it was just wishful thinking. With his current ability, going to the netherworld was not a good thing. After coming to his senses, Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked, "I heard you and Jin Miao say that you want to visit Yi Shao and Ji Wu. Are you really going to look for them?" Immortal Lord Crocodile fell silent. After a long time, he sighed, "People are like this. Even Jin Miao doesn't take me seriously. Imagine what Yi Shao and Ji Wu will do. Maybe Ji Wu's attitude will be better, and Yi Shao has always been arrogant and condescending. Why should I go and humiliate myself?" Sigh. Strength decides everything. You're finally willing to wake up from your dream. Yu Qianqiu despised him in his heart. Then, he comforted him, "Old monster, don't be discouraged. An old steed has great ambitions. Life will inevitably encounter ups and downs. Whether you're a hero or a coward, the key is to see who has the last laugh. So what if it's Ji Wu? So what if it's Yi Shao? So what if he's the immortal emperor and the emperor of the netherworld? Don't you still have a lot of time to take things slowly? Now that everyone thinks that you're dead, the immortal emperor won't pay attention to you anymore. Without any hindrances, it's time for you to show your true abilities. If you don't believe me, you can wait another 1,000 years. Anything is possible. Of course, we have to start from scratch, step by step. Otherwise, everything is just empty talk." Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes lit up at these words, and his ambition was ignited once again. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Yu Qianqiu. He said in a low voice, "Then how do you think we should start from scratch?" "It's very simple. We'll benefit each other. In short, we'll help each other." Yu Qianqiu coughed and said in a weaker tone, "First of all, help me find the purple flame first. Once I cultivate the Samadhi true fire, I'll burn whoever dares to stop us." Chapter 742. Humph. That's a good idea, Immortal Lord Crocodile said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu was no fool. He naturally heard the sarcasm in Immortal Lord Crocodile's tone, but he was happy to play dumb and pretend that he did not understand. As the saying went, if one was not thick-skinned, one should not come out. Boss Yu was experienced and knowledgeable, so this bit of provocation was nothing to him. Immortal Lord Crocodile also saw that this guy was thick-skinned and did not want to talk nonsense. He looked around and frowned. Jin Miao and the others died here. It won't be long before Yi Shao and the others find out. I'm afraid we can no longer stay here and have to find another place. Don't worry. It's very safe here. When Yu Qianqiu said this, he looked into the distance with a hint of worry in his eyes. He was not saying this without reason, because the culprit, Bai Changchun, had gone in the opposite direction. If he met guests from the immortal city on the way, with Bai Changchun's personality, it was inevitable that he would fight. The culprit had already shown himself. Those immortals could not be expected to collect the corpses of Jin Miao and the others. Immortal Lord Crocodile was slightly startled, but he also understood from the worry in his eyes. The two did not say anything more. They flew down the mountain, turned a corner, and appeared in the forest on the other side. When the two walked to the Moon Lake, there were no more cannibals by the lake, and the tents at the foot of the mountain had been cleaned up. While Yu Qianzhou was puzzled, he saw many heads peeking out of the caves on the mountain. They were all frightened by the movement outside and all hid in the caves. Knowing that the two warriors had returned, Garland was the first to run out of the cave, heading straight for Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou was truly speechless towards this passionate woman. He allowed her to directly enter his bad side, and his face was also bitten a few times by her. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at this scene coldly and said, "I was wondering why you kept staying here. Turns out you're having an affair with this woman." Yu Qianzhou immediately took the time to reply, "Then you've wronged me. This is their custom. The women of the tribe like warriors the most. If you have the ability, then put that stinking face of yours away. I guarantee that there will be unexpected consequences." Seeing that the people outside were safe, the clansmen in the cave came out one after another. Immortal Lord Crocodile glanced at the crowd and found that many women were staring at him. He was speechless. He believed Yu Qianzhou's words. "What happened over there?" Garland asked as he hung around Yu Qianzhou. "I don't know either." Yu Qianzhou denied it immediately. He then pushed Garland's muscular body away and said solemnly, "Clan leader Garland, can I proceed with my test now?" Garland's expression froze, and he immediately remembered what the test was. He waved his hand and said, "You are the strongest warriors here, so you don't need to be tested. You can stay here as long as you like." What a joke. A single person had killed a moonlight crocodile that the entire clan couldn't deal with. Why would he need to take the postgraduate entrance exam? Yu Qianzhou didn't care. He didn't want to trouble himself. He smiled and said, "Clan leader Garland, we are indebted to your clan for taking us in. We don't know how to thank you. Therefore, we have decided to participate in the fence meeting on behalf of your clan." The news that the new torture master of the demon region was Niu Yud had spread throughout the entire cultivation world. In particular, the news that Niu Yud had intimidated more than 100 soul formation cultivators and forced each lord to hand over 200 million superior-grade spirit stones shook the entire cultivation world. This disappearance was too shocking. Normally, the person who was humiliated would not expose his own shortcomings. No one knew who had spread this news. In an instant, Niu Yud's prestige in the cultivation world increased greatly. Bai Changchun, who had already left the cultivation world, was gradually forgotten. At least, the haze that shrouded the entire cultivation world had completely disappeared. As for the title of the #1 expert in the cultivation world, it was undoubtedly pushed to Niu Yud by everyone. Most people didn't expect that Niu Yud would actually take over Bai Changchun's position. It seemed that Niu Yud was an immortal from the celestial realm. This made the cultivators in the world sigh. Bai Changchun had left, and now Niu Yud had come. The demon region was still mysterious and powerful. It was the same for generations, and it was still inviolable. At this time, the forces of the various countries finally began to attack the Chinese cultivation world. After the Chinese cultivation world knew that the soul formation cultivators of the various countries didn't dare to trespass after being warned by Niu Yud, they were relieved and united to fight the forces of the various countries. This time, the various sects of China had to fight with their lives on the line. The other party was serious and wanted to snatch his territory. Once they lost, it would be a matter of life and death. Therefore, the old guys who had been cultivating in seclusion came out one after another. In an instant, the Chinese cultivation world erupted with shocking combat power, and the battle situation was extremely tragic. In general, the Chinese cultivation world was still weak, but the gap was not big. After all, the various sects of China still had a strong foundation, except for the lack of soul formation cultivators. The reason why the Chinese cultivation world was able to resist the joint forces of the various countries was because the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce, which was the most powerful and had the most disciples, didn't participate in this battle. Otherwise, the World Commerce Chamber would definitely be a powerful force that could change the balance. Among the various countries, the De-Rome Kingdom and the Baiwan Kingdom didn't participate in this battle either, which greatly reduced the pressure on the Hua-Xia Empire. Facing such a stalemate was really out of the expectations of the various countries, and it was somewhat embarrassing. More than 300 countries had joined forces, but they still couldn't deal with the Chinese cultivation world. After the various countries discussed, the various lords had no choice but to bring out 80% to 90% of their strength for the sake of their own reputation. With this, the various countries finally invaded the Chinese cultivation world, and the forces of both sides started a life-and-death battle within the Chinese territory. At this critical moment, the supporting immortal island could be said to have erupted. Not to mention the various countries, even the Chinese cultivation world was shocked. Originally, the supporting immortal island had used more than 30 tribulation passing realm experts, and everyone thought that was the limit of the supporting immortal island. Who knew that at this critical moment, the supporting immortal island would suddenly send more than 50 tribulation passing realm experts to participate in the battle? These people were all people that the various sects thought were long dead, but unexpectedly, they were all alive and well. They were all hidden by the supporting immortal island and had broken through to the tribulation passing realm. In total, the supporting immortal island had invested more than 90 tribulation passing realm experts, and the other tribulation passing realm disciples were mobilized by the hundreds and thousands. Tens of thousands of disciples of the cultivation pavilion, regardless of their cultivation level, as long as they were at the foundation establishment realm, they would all be bathed in blood. Based on this calculation, without the soul formation experts, the supporting immortal island could almost match the strength of the World Commerce Chamber. This kind of strength was really shocking, and people couldn't help but sigh. The so-called number one sect in the world wasn't an undeserved reputation. It was indeed valiant. With this kind of strength, even in the entire cultivation world, the supporting immortal island was completely worthy of the title of number one sect in the world. With this kind of strength, the 10,000 demons wouldn't be outdone by the supporting immortal island's move. Originally, they had mobilized more than 20 tribulation passing realm experts, but at this critical moment, more than 30 people that everyone thought were dead actually appeared. Moreover, they were all tribulation passing realm experts. In total, the 10,000 demons had invested more than 60 tribulation passing realm experts. In addition to the tens of thousands of disciples from the sect, it was a huge force. It didn't diminish the prestige of the number one sect in the demonic path in the slightest. The actions of the two sects shocked the other sections. These two sects had actually hidden such a strong strength. What exactly were they planning? Even so, with such strong reinforcements appearing on their side, no one cared about anything. This immediately boosted the morale of the other sects, and they began a crazy all-out counterattack. In the end, the allied forces of the various countries suffered heavy losses. It wasn't just heavy losses, it was quite heavy losses. In this crazy counterattack of the Chinese cultivation world, the allied forces of the various countries lost about a third of their strength. Just like that, the balance of power was completely lost. This battle couldn't be fought anymore. In an instant, the various countries' forces were chased out of the Chinese cultivation world. People couldn't help but marvel at the might of the Chinese cultivation world. The situation of the battle dumbfounded the lords of the various countries. Pei Fong was so angry that he scolded, supporting Immortal Island and the 10,000 demons, these two bastards, they actually dared to play dirty with me. They actually hid so many tribulation-passing realm experts behind them. Don't ever fall into my hands, or else I'll teach you a lesson. However, after scolding them, he had to admit that the Chinese cultivation world was indeed the birthplace of the world's cultivators. When they flew into a rage, it was extraordinary. Then, Pei Fong began to scold the various countries for not putting in enough effort. He scolded them for not being united, which was why they suffered such a great humiliation. After an all-out war, the various countries' forces had no choice but to temporarily cease the war. Meanwhile, the Chinese cultivation world was in high spirits. If it wasn't for the fact that the various countries had soul formation stage experts, they would have wanted to counterattack the other countries. After this battle, the Chinese cultivation world's morale soared. They realized that the various countries' forces were actually not as terrifying as they had imagined. Little did they know that among the nearly 100,000 cultivators from the various countries, most of them were cultivators at the core formation stage and above. There were more than 400 tribulation-passing realm experts. Meanwhile, the Chinese cultivation world only managed to gather about 300 tribulation-passing realm experts with all their might. The supporting Immortal Island and the 10,000 demons accounted for half of them. There were many other cultivators, probably more than 200,000 in total. In fact, in terms of strength, the various countries' forces were not weaker than the Chinese cultivation world. This was because they had more experts, which was an important factor in determining the outcome of the battle. However, the various countries' forces were indeed not united, just as Pei Fong had scolded. It was fine when they first attacked, but once they entered the Chinese territory, they followed the orders of their superiors and focused on searching for the star bead. They were simply worried that it would fall into the hands of others, so they wanted to strike first to gain the upper hand. Meanwhile, in order to protect their homeland, the Chinese cultivation world worked together to form a united rope. It should be known that the power of unity was terrifying. Therefore, the various countries' forces gave the Chinese cultivation world a chance to divide and annihilate them. They gradually nibbled away at them until the final battle, when the balance of power changed. In the end, the Chinese cultivation world won. Chapter 743. It was no wonder that Pei Fong was so anxious. Among all the feudal lords, he, Qi Zhoujuan, and Ouyang were the strongest when they worked together, and he was the most outstanding among the three of them. The ones who gained the most from conquering China's cultivation world were the three of them. Everyone was searching for a bead like finding a needle in a haystack. Naturally, the strongest faction had a higher chance of finding the star bead. However, everyone was not united and had their own selfish motives. Who didn't want the star bead? Even Qi Zhoujuan and Ouyang Da's factions were doing the same thing after invading China's cultivation world. Actually, Pei Fong was most likely referring to Qi Zhoujuan and Ouyang Da when he scolded them for not being united. However, they were allies and it wasn't good for them to fall out, so he could only scold them indirectly. As for the others, he didn't put them in his eyes. So what if he found it? At most, he would just snatch it. After all, his strength was right there. How could everyone not know what Pei Fong was planning? Naturally, they would strike first and gain the upper hand. Speaking of which, when Pei Fong scolded everyone, he should also reflect on himself. Before invading China, the three factions led by him had impatiently divided up Huazhongming, Pu Taidong, and Yanji's territories. He thought that he had taken the majority for granted. His actions had already disappointed everyone. If everyone still didn't do it for themselves, then the three factions would be a good example. As for the star bead that could cause a war between immortals in ancient times, everyone wanted it even more urgently. In the end, the various countries' factions were defeated by China. Although Yu Qianzhou was in the eastern sacred land, he would often sneakily find Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun to get information. After learning that China's cultivation world had defeated the various countries' joint invasion, even he was very surprised. He couldn't help but marvel at the strength of supporting Xian Island and 10,000 demons. These two factions were truly sinister. As expected, there were many hidden dragons and crouching tigers. It was very difficult for outsiders to figure out their ins and outs. If it wasn't because they were forced into a corner by the various countries, who would know that these two factions had hidden so many tribulation-passing experts? However, what puzzled Yu Qianqiu was that since supporting Xian Island and 10,000 demons had so many tribulation-passing experts, why hadn't there been a spirit-severing expert after so many years? Excluding the possibility of Bai Changchun scaring him away, that shouldn't be the case. Could it be that there was a saying that the people of different places were nurtured by different people? Or could it be that there were some secrets that he didn't know about? Speaking of which, Huaxia was quite unlucky. The cultivation world was at war, and the army was at war. Everything was in chaos. Even Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun had the desire to participate in the battle, but Yu Qianqiu strictly forbade them to only watch and not participate. However, there was one exception. No matter who it was, as long as they dared to interfere in the secular world's war, the Green Gang and the Hong Gang would make a move at all costs. As for him, Yu Qianqiu, he wouldn't be polite either. He didn't mind putting aside the matter of the East Holy Land for now. The war in the cultivation world made Yu Qianqiu even more determined. Both sides actually mobilized so many cultivators. There were more than 300,000 cultivators participating in the war. It was comparable to a chaotic battle between armies. He couldn't help but ask, was it necessary for so many cultivators to exist in the human world? If this went on, would the human world still be the world of ordinary people? It must be reduced. Because of this, Yu Qianqiu was even considering whether he should make a fake star orb and throw it to the various countries. He reckoned that it would cause internal strife, right? If he was asked if he wanted the star orb, he would undoubtedly want it. Ever since he first heard about this thing, he had always wanted it. However, the impact of this thing was too great. It caused turmoil in the three realms. Even the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld coveted it. If he said that he wanted it, he would be too stupid. Some things couldn't be said out loud and could only be hidden in his heart. He was determined to help Shi Wenguang conquer the world, yet he could just casually take something and send him away. Even he didn't believe it, no matter how lively the cultivation world was, as long as it didn't provoke him, he temporarily didn't participate and only watched silently from the back. Because he had found a new route to the top, and that was the East Holy Land. He had always believed in walking the path of the top. The lower his cultivation, the more he should walk the path of the top. His experience from his previous life told him that this was the best way to rise quickly. There was a saying in his previous life. If you followed an official for a long time, you would be a low-ranking official, if not a high-ranking one. This saying could also be applied to the cultivation world. If you followed someone with a high cultivation for a long time, even if your current cultivation wasn't great, your future cultivation wouldn't be too bad. In fact, as long as he had the chance, he would always do this. Reality proved that the effect was pretty good. Taking the current immortal crocodile for example, he had only followed him for a few days. Just a few spirit stones from him would be many times better than him fighting for his life in the cultivation world for so many years. The World Chamber of Commerce run by Yin Baikong was considered good at doing business, right? But even after so many years of accumulation, he didn't earn as much as he did in a few days. This was the benefit of walking the path of the top. Not only were there many benefits, but it was also very beneficial to improve one's foresight and experience. He had only been with Immortal Crocodile for a few days, but he was already starting to look down on the fights between the top experts in the cultivation world. Take your time to make a fuss. Once I've made a name for myself in the upper echelons, it'll be a piece of cake for me to deal with you. Spirit Fong Valley. The disciples of the valley and the Wen family searched the entire territory, but they couldn't find Yan Juixing and third brother Axane. Lu Yanqing knew that it was useless to continue searching, so she finally gave up. Wen Lanfeng also lost his reason to stay and had no choice but to leave. When the news of Niu Yu taking over as the torture master of the ghostly region reached the two of them, they were really speechless. Especially when they heard that Niu Yu had extorted 200 million top-grade spirit stones from more than 100 soul formation experts, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. As expected, this was Yu Qianqiu's style. It was simply incomparable to the arrogant Bai Changchun. To think that this guy could think of something like this. He was too bold to dare to use Niu Yu's name as a prank. They really didn't know what Bai Changchun was thinking. He actually passed the position of torture master to Yu Qianqiu. Could this troublemaker really take on such a heavy responsibility? Looking down from the plateau at the top of Medicine Hut, Spirit Fong Valley had resumed its previous heroic deeds of saving the world. There were endless pedestrians on the mountain road in the distance. Under her beautiful face, which was like the morning glow reflecting the snow, her red lips opened slightly inside. She said, I originally thought that after Bai Changchun left, there would only be two people in the entire cultivation world who could take on the position of torture master. One is Nongzhu from the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest, and the other is you. I didn't expect that Bai Changchun would let Yu Qianqiu succeed as torture master. Bai Changchun's actions are a little thoughtless. You think too much. How can I be the torture master of Ghost region? Bai Changchun must have his reasons for doing this. Wen Lanfeng smiled faintly. Although he looked calm on the surface, he felt inexplicably uncomfortable. To be honest, although he didn't want to be the torture master of Ghost region, he secretly thought about it based on seniority. If he removed the relationship between Nongzhu and Bai Changchun, it was possible that Bai Changchun would really ask him to take over as torture master. Bai Changchun spared his life twice, and he should send Bai Changchun off to the Eastern Holy Land. However, he had a little trick up his sleeve. He thought that if Bai Changchun came to him to take over the position of Devil Region Torture Envoy before he left, Lu Yanqing would see him and he would generously reject Bai Changchun. This was what Wen Lanfeng wanted Lu Yanqing to see. In fact, he thought that the possibility of Bai Changchun looking for him was quite high. Because almost all the previous torture masters of Ghost region were the world's #1 experts, and they were at least experts in the late soul formation stage. Nongzhu, who was likely to succeed him, was only in the middle soul formation stage. After Bai Changchun left, he would obviously be the world's #1 expert. In addition, his character and prestige were good in the cultivation world. Who else could be Bai Changchun's first choice but him? Wen Lanfeng didn't think that there was anyone more suitable than him, although he didn't want it. However, to his great surprise, not only did Bai Changchun not look for him, he did not even look for Nongzhu. It was actually Yu Qianqiu, who was only at the crossing calamity stage, who took over as the torturer of the demon ghost region. If it was Nongzhu who took over, he would feel better. However, it was Yu Qianqiu who had average cultivation and a bad character. He really felt a little uncomfortable. Sometimes, people would always compare their own strengths with others' weaknesses. Through this comparison, they would realize that they were great. The dignified Wen Lanfeng couldn't help but fall into a cliché. This was human nature. Little did he know that Bai Changchun didn't even consider him as the first choice. He would only look for him when there was really no one else available. What he didn't know was that in fact, in the eyes of the two previous torture masters of Ghost region, Nongzhu was stronger than him. What he didn't know was that Nongzhu's cultivation talent was absolutely top-notch in the cultivation world, even higher than his. It was just that Nongzhu was used to being lazy and didn't want to be restrained, so she deliberately suppressed her cultivation. Otherwise, after all these years, who would be the world's #1 expert after Bai Changchun left? If Bai Changchun were to reconsider the candidate for the Ghost Region's torture master, he would still choose Yu Qianzhou and not someone else. Ever since he saw Yu Qianzhou in the Eastern Holy Land and saw Immortal Lord Crocodile hanging out with him, Bai Changchun was sure that he had chosen the right person, so he left resolutely. This was because making friends often reflected a person's ability, and it didn't depend entirely on luck. If Wen Lanfeng met Immortal Lord Crocodile and saved him, no one knew what the outcome would be, but the two of them would definitely not be friends. As for Nongzhu and Yu Qianzhou, these two cheeky fellows, they would definitely be able to trick Immortal Lord Crocodile into becoming friends with their words. Bai Changchun had already seen this before. Back then, he had fallen for Nongzhu's trick and helped him take the blame for so many years in the Ghost Region. Not to mention Yu Qianzhou, Bai Changchun had already heard him call Immortal Lord Crocodile an old monster. The two of them were almost in the same boat. If there was any trouble in the Ghost Region that couldn't be solved, Yu Qianzhou would definitely ask Immortal Lord Crocodile to help. Chapter 744. Later, news came from Xian Island. After Bai Changchun left, Nongzhu and Yu Qianzhou were coveted by the lords of various countries. Nongzhu even killed Hua Zongming, Pu Taidong, and Yan Ji in anger. Although the crisis was finally resolved, Wen Lanfeng secretly felt ashamed. He regretted that he did not help Nongzhu at the critical moment because of his selfishness. After all, Nongzhu had saved his life twice at the most critical moment. The two people standing on the platform of the medicine hut each had their own thoughts. Lu Yanqing was now thinking that after the lords of various countries left Xian Island, why did Niu Yud, also known as Yu Qianzhou, appear in Shantian Island? Could it be that Yu Qianzhou was faster than a cultivator of Huashan realm? No matter how she thought about it, it was a little strange. How could Niu Yud frighten the lords of various countries? It should be known that this group of people would not release the eagle without seeing the rabbit. It was impossible to frighten them without seeing it with their own eyes. Unfortunately, those who had suffered a loss did not want to mention this matter again. No one knew what had happened at that time. In any case, the group of people obediently took out 200 million high-grade spirit stones, especially Pei Fong, who was forced to take out 300 million. The more Lu Yanqing thought about it, the more curious she became. Now she found that Yu Qianzhou came and went like the wind. She rarely heard about his route. He always appeared here and there suddenly. Wherever he went, he could stir up a big commotion. Or he simply disappeared, completely disappearing in front of everyone. And when he appeared, there was a lot of scolding everywhere in the cultivation world. He was not afraid of being scolded and could not be beaten to death. He ran around everywhere, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. For example, now, when the cultivation world was in a state of chaos, Yu Qianzhou had completely disappeared from the cultivation world. There was no news about him in the entire cultivation world. Could he really behave and pretend to be Niu Yud in the demon realm? Lu Yanqing faintly felt that it was somewhat impossible. In fact, Lu Yanqing also understood that although Bai Changchun was a proud and aloof person, he was definitely not a person who would act recklessly. However, what Lu Yanqing could not understand was why Bai Changchun would choose such a reckless person to be his disciple and even let him take over the demon ghost realm. Could there be more to it? Of the two torture envoys of the demon ghost region, one had the highest cultivation base in the world and was arrogant, while the other. Lu Yanqing now felt that Yu Qianzhou was like a riddle, laughing and scolding, showing his true nature. He was also a real villain, but she could not figure him out, as if he was hidden in the fog. Lu Yanqing thinks that she just wants to see what secrets are hidden behind Yu Qianzhou, but she doesn't know that when a woman starts to be curious and concerned about a man, that is the beginning of the disaster. Especially when that man's world was filled with legendary colors. The more one understood, the more dazzling it would be. The two people on the cliff fell into silence. When Lanfeng slightly exhaled and broke the silence, Yanqing, should we go to the demon ghost region to pay a visit to the new torture envoys, Niu Yud? This was the only excuse he could find to spend more time with Lu Yanqing. However, Lu Yanqing gently shook her head and said, the rules of the demon ghost region do not allow trespassing. It's not good to go there rashly. Let's talk about it later. She believed that with the enchantress and Yan Yu here, Yu Qianqiu would not leave them alone and would come. When Lanfeng paused and slightly sighed, then take care. I'll go back first. Remember to find me if there's anything. This time, thank you. Lu Yanqing nodded her head and expressed her gratitude. When Lanfeng shook his head with a wry smile, stepped forward and flashed into the sky, in the great snow mountain of Di Rong country, the secret chamber in the belly of the mountain was filled with red fog. It was so thick that the movement inside could not be seen, and the smell of blood was still pungent. Yan Zhuixing's astonished voice came from inside. Niu Yu took over the demon ghost region. Outside the secret chamber, Bing Qingzi, who was guarding at the door, said, yes, the news is true. But it's really surprising that Bai Changchun would choose him to take over the demon ghost region. I thought it was either Nongzhu or Wen Lanfeng. This Bai Changchun is really powerful. He can even pull the guide of the immortal world to take over his demon ghost region. During this time, Bing Qingzi almost never left the door of the secret chamber to protect Yan Zhuixing. He did not want Yan Zhuixing to encounter any danger again. Because Yan Zhuixing could not be so lucky to escape from death every time. If something really happened to Yan Zhuixing, it would be an unbearable burden for him. Years of hard work would go down the drain. For safety reasons, he even summoned the snow flood dragon to the door of the secret chamber. One man and one flood dragon each guarded one side. The security was tight. In the secret chamber filled with red fog, a white figure suddenly shot out. The snow flood dragon's head stretched out and shrank like lightning and bit into its mouth. A bloodless naked girl was directly swallowed into the stomach of the snow flood dragon. Having eaten another delicious meal, the snow flood dragon shook its head in satisfaction. Its bright red eyes stared at the secret chamber, seemingly wanting to continue. Bing Qingzi, who was sitting cross-legged, just casually glanced at it. At first, he was a little uncomfortable about using living people to practice demonic arts, but now he was used to it. Every day, several virgin girls would be sent to the foot of the mountain. It was unknown how many of them had been used up until now. If it was in other countries, it would have already aroused the vigilance of others with the constant disappearance of girls. But with the identity of the state preceptor of Di Rong country, it was a piece of cake for him to settle this. Moreover, Di Rong country was originally Bing Qingzi's territory. Capturing a few poor girls was nothing to him. Yan Zhuixing, who was hiding in the red fog in the secret chamber, continued Bing Qingzi's words. He gritted his teeth and said, it's all because of him that I have to hide like this. So what if he is an immortal from the immortal world? When I succeed in my demonic arts, I will definitely let him know the power of my demonic arts. I will make him beg for death. A sharp roar echoed in the passage of the mountain for a long time. The cannibal tribe by the moon lake was singing and dancing. The atmosphere was very warm, for no other reason than to send off the warriors participating in the fence contest. The cannibal tribe was just a small tribe with a few hundred people. For many years, the 3 strongest warriors would be selected to represent the tribe in the contest. Originally, the 3 warriors had already been selected. But because Yu Qinqiu's enthusiasm affected Immortal Crocodile, the 2 of them replaced the other 2 warriors. With warriors like the 2 of them participating in the contest, the cannibal tribe was naturally very happy. Based on their bravery in killing the lake monster, they would definitely qualify for the contest. However, the 2 of them were outsiders, and they were only temporarily taken in by the tribe. How could they let the guests replace them? Garland represented the cannibal tribe and repeatedly refused, but Yu Qianqiu held an incredibly sincere attitude and continuously tried to convince everyone. In the end, the entire cannibal tribe was moved, and they allowed those two fellows to represent the cannibal tribe. Immortal Crocodile didn't know what was going on. After chatting with Yu Qianqiu a few times, he actually agreed to accompany him to participate in such a boring thing as the fence contest. After thinking about it, he felt that something was wrong. How could he have agreed so carelessly? But since he had agreed, he couldn't go back on his word. In the end, he decided to let nature take its course. Once they decided to participate, the two of them realized that they had to solve a lot of problems to attend the fence contest. First was the problem of Immortal Crocodile's cultivation. To be honest, although Immortal Crocodile's cultivation was very high in the past, it was nothing in the Eastern Holy Land now. It was very easy for other immortals to see through his identity as an immortal cultivator. They were willing to participate in the fence contest as an immortal cultivator, but others definitely wouldn't. So they had to hide it. So Yu Qianqiu took out the breath-concealing pill and gave it to Immortal Crocodile. In the end, Immortal Crocodile thought that the pill was too low grade, or rather, too insignificant, so he took out something better to hide his cultivation. As for Yu Qianqiu, he was born with a special ability, so he didn't need to use anything to hide his cultivation. As long as he didn't expose himself, others wouldn't be able to see through him. But there was one big problem that gave both of them a headache. Immortal Crocodile almost went berserk because of this problem, but Yu Qianqiu persuaded him to back down. He even said a lot of inspirational things about enduring hardships and waiting for an old horse to return to the stable. It was really hard on him, and even he felt like he was sick of it. There was no other reason than their appearance. Yu Qianqiu was easier to deal with, but the key was that Immortal Crocodile's appearance was too eye-catching. He had a burly figure, snow-white hair, and an elegant silver robe that flowed like silver silk. It was very eye-catching. If an immortal cultivator saw him walking out, their first impression would be that he was either an immortal or a monster. It would be strange if they didn't suspect him. So the two of them began to change. Garland quickly asked his clansmen to hurry up and make clothes that matched the style of the cannibals. In fact, it was just a few pieces of animal skin. After putting it on, they realized that it was really too revealing. Even Yu Qianqiu was too embarrassed to walk out of the tent, let alone Immortal Crocodile. No matter what, he was one of the 12 great immortal lords in the immortal world. How could he do something that was almost naked? In the end, it was Yu Qianqiu who relied on his eloquence and courage to walk out of the tent first. Immortal Crocodile gritted his teeth and followed him out. As soon as the two of them appeared, they immediately shocked the cannibals. Their fair skin made the eyes of the cannibal women, who had bronze-colored beauty, light up. They wanted nothing more than to swallow the two of them into their stomachs. This problem was exposed in time. Both of them realized that they had to solve the problem of skin color. Otherwise, it would be too weird to walk with the cannibals. So Yu Qianqiu dragged Immortal Crocodile to sunbathe, saying that the skin color would be more realistic and would not be exposed. In the end, after a few days of exposure, the two of them realized that because their physiques were extraordinary, it was unlikely that they would be tanned in a short period of time without a few years of hard work. After much effort, Immortal Crocodile, with his rich experience, finally came up with something that would not be easily seen through. The two of them smeared some ingredients on their bodies and turned their skin bronze. Immortal Crocodile's long silver hair was also smeared with another color of ingredients. The two of them worked for a long time before solving all the problems that needed to be solved. Chapter 745. The sun had just risen, and the cool morning breeze was cool. The ripples on the moon lake were clear and moving, and the water plants by the lake swayed beautifully. Surrounded by hundreds of cannibals, Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Crocodile walked out of the tent. The two of them were almost half naked, facing everyone's gaze without fear. Anyway, everyone was like this. Birds of a feather flocked together. There was nothing strange about it. However, the two of them stood in stark contrast. Compared to Immortal Crocodile, who was almost 2 meters tall, Yu Qianqiu looked a little weak. Fortunately, he had been practicing the animal show for a long time, so his tight muscles did not make him look weak. Yu Qianqiu, who was wearing beast skin boots and a leather skirt, walked in front of the majestic horse with large strides. He flipped his braids in an incomparably coquettish manner and directly jumped on the horse. Garland, who was leading the horse for him, looked resentful and reluctantly handed the reins to him. Yu Qianqiu quickly pretended not to see it and turned his head. The 6 of them all got on the horse. The 3 warriors were Yu Qianqiu, Immortal Crocodile, and Boli. The other 3 were to help them. The moment the 6 of them got on their horses, the crowd of clansmen parted to make a path for them. They danced wildly on both sides. More than 20 animal skin drums were arranged in 2 rows. Intense peng-peng sounds rang out as they sent the warriors off. Boli led the way, pulling the reins and galloping away. Yu Qianqiu followed closely behind, followed by Immortal Crocodile, and the remaining 3 tribesmen. The 6 of them rushed into the winding path in the distant forest, disappearing from the anticipating eyes of the tribesmen. The winding path in the dense forest was winding, and if one's horsemanship was not good, it was easy to crash into trees or run into bushes. Fortunately, the 6 of them were good horsemanship, and the branches and leaves on both sides quickly flashed past their ears. Yu Qianqiu, who was following behind Boli, suddenly heard Immortal Crocodile's voice behind him. That woman's eyes were very clingy. She took off all her clothes and touched you a few times at night. I can't believe you could resist it. He was naturally referring to Garland. Old monster, you actually peeped on me while I was sleeping. Yu Qianqiu replied angrily. What are you shouting for? Do you think I don't know that you're spying on me? Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. It wasn't that he was a peeping Tom, but Immortal Lord Crocodile's actions shocked him. She had thought that he would be reserved, but who would have thought that this old monster would actually have a taste of meat in the cannibal tribe? He seemed to not reject anyone, and every night, he would have sex with several women. How heroic! Yu Qianqiu was curious and could not help but use his spiritual sense to check every night. But then again, with the other party's cultivation, it wouldn't be difficult for him to discover that he was peeping. It was just that he didn't expect the old monster to be so vigilant even when doing things. It was really surprising. The horses galloped through the forest, and the sound of hooves rang out incessantly. However, the 2 of them were silent. Let's not talk about each other. Neither of us was a good person. But after a while, Immortal Lord Crocodile transmitted his voice again. Yu Qianqiu, if you can't help me recover my cultivation in 500 years, don't blame me for being impolite. Hey! You've said it 100 times. Do I look like a liar to you? Don't mention it in the future. I'm sick of hearing it even if you don't say it. Yu Qianqiu gave a perfunctory reply. In order to get Immortal Lord Crocodile to be his bodyguard, he had spent a lot of effort. In the end, he made up a white lie that he could help him recover his cultivation in 500 years. Only then did he manage to tame Immortal Lord Crocodile. Otherwise, why would Immortal Lord Crocodile accompany him everywhere? He had already calculated that if the 2 of them were really together for 500 years, even a rock would feel warm. He didn't believe that the old monster would really do anything to him. If Immortal Lord Crocodile was really that heartless, then he had nothing to say. He would leave, and Immortal Lord Crocodile would continue to stay in the Eastern Holy Land. They would pretend that they had never met. If his cultivation was higher than Immortal Lord Crocodile's in 500 years. Of course, Yu Qianqiu was just imagining it. He didn't think that his cultivation would surpass Immortal Lord Crocodile's in 500 years. In fact, Immortal Lord Crocodile wasn't that gullible. However, the master-disciple pair's methods were really unimaginable and too magical. Although he didn't believe that he could recover his cultivation in 500 years, he still had some hope in his heart. What if he really succeeded? It was better than spending tens of thousands of years to cultivate again, right? Moreover, 500 years was really nothing compared to his long lifespan. It was worth a try. In the end, he more or less felt an indescribable charisma from Yu Qianqiu. He realized that it was quite interesting to be with this guy. Although this guy wasn't a good person, ever since he got to know him, he suddenly realized that having a long life wasn't lonely at all. Occasionally, he had a glimmer of enlightenment. He asked himself, what is the true meaning of cultivation? After spending half a day, the group of 6 finally ran out of the forest. They could see a road in the wilderness in front of them, stretching into the distance like a yellow ribbon. In the distance, there were many houses clustered together, and it seemed to be a small town. Bolly pulled the reins and rode on the hillside. The 5 people behind him lined up and looked into the distance. In just a short while, several groups of people had run on the road. They were dressed like their own people. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't know which tribe they were from, he guessed that their purpose was similar to that of the cannibals. They were all going to participate in the fence meeting. Judging from the number of people passing by, it seemed that the cannibals were really a small tribe. At least every group that passed by had at least a dozen riders, but they only had 6 people. The sun was high in the sky. Looking at the panting horses, Bolly waved his hand and pointed to the small town in the distance. The small town in front is the midpoint to Lost City. When we get there, let the horses recover their strength and continue on their way. That way, we can reach Lost City before dark when the horses are exhausted. What do you think? Facing Bolly's questioning gaze, Yu Qianqiu scratched his braids and smiled. We don't know each other well, so we'll listen to you. Originally, with his and immortal crocodile's abilities, there was no need to run slowly to Lost City. They could just fly there, but in order to not expose their cultivation, they had to do this. Bolly smiled heartily and nodded. He took the lead and rushed down the hillside. The 6 riders ran on the yellow road towards the small town in the distance. Running on the straight road was obviously much more comfortable than running on the winding path in the forest. Yu Qianqiu swung his braids in the wind. The feeling of the wind blowing through his hair was nice and cool. Seeing that they were outside the town, Yu Qianqiu was about to rush into the town, but he saw Bolly slow down and pull the reins to a stop. The others also stopped. Only Yu Qianqiu did not notice that he had run too far, and only stopped in front of the town's gate. The gate made of wood and stone had a bit of an ancient charm, but the workmanship was very rough. There were many people on the streets inside. Looking at their clothes, it was obvious that most of them were people of various tribes, but some were wearing more formal long robes. Yu Qianqiu took a few glances at the streets inside and found that there were not many decent houses. He turned his horse around and saw that Bolly and the others had already dismounted and led the horses to a few shady trees by the roadside. They had the intention of sitting on the ground, and only Immortal Crocodile was looking at him with a faint smile. Yu Qianqiu immediately ran over, jumped off the horse, and asked Bolly curiously, "The town is in front. Aren't you going in to rest? What are you doing here?" Bolly looked at the other 3 tribesmen awkwardly. Yu Qianqiu immediately became suspicious, and under his repeated questioning, Bolly finally told him the truth. In fact, the customs of each tribe were quite fierce, and fights were common. It was difficult to get along well with the other tribes. The cannibals were the smallest tribe in this area, and it was inevitable for them to suffer some losses. To put it bluntly, they were often bullied. This town was called Shizi Town, which meant the westernmost town on the mainland. Originally, there was no town here. This town was built by some of the larger tribes because the nearby tribes envied the life of the people in the city. They began to learn from the people in the city to do business. The mayor was the chief of the largest tribe in the area, the Shizi tribe. Although the cannibals were small, they were a place where warriors came from. Often, there would be people who could participate in the fence contest and win generous rewards. This made the nearby tribes jealous and hateful, because there were many tribes participating in the fence contest, but there were only 100 winners. Therefore, every time the cannibals settled in the town to rest, there would always be people from other tribes who would come to provoke them, taking the opportunity to injure or disable the cannibal warriors, so that they could not participate in the contest. This method seemed very reckless, but it was an effective way to reduce the number of strong competitors. And no matter how brave the cannibal warriors were, they could not resist the large number of people. In the end, they could only compromise and rest here, not daring to enter the town. In fact, although this kind of thing sounded annoying, it was not a big deal between the tribes. Bullying the weak was completely the nature of these almost primitive tribes. But after hearing this, Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and despised bully infinitely. No wonder your woman was so anxious to sleep with me. After thinking about it, Yu Qianqiu also felt that he should not cause trouble here. It was not that he was afraid of the nearby tribes, but he was worried that it would attract the attention of the immortals. So he led the horse and was about to tie it up. Unexpectedly, a gust of wind blew, and a lot of things fell from the swaying branches. Yu Qianqiu felt something crawling on his head. He grabbed it, and a big green furry worm wriggled in his hand. Yu Qianqiu was originally prepared to just bear with it and let it go. He didn't want to cause any trouble, but in the end, this disgusting caterpillar caused his stomach to be filled with rage. Squeak! The caterpillar was pinched so hard that green juice shot out, and it lost its life on the spot. He threw it away and jumped directly on the horse's back. He said to Bully in a deep voice, "Damn it. Kind people get bullied, and hiding under a tree still gets bullied by caterpillars. There is no way to live like this. All of you, get on the horse and go to the town to rest." Regardless of the consequences, he rode all the way to West Town. Bully and the others looked at each other. Immortal Crocodile had already gotten on the horse with a smile, and they had no choice but to follow. On the other side, Yu Qianqiu directly charged into the town on his horse. He madly rushed from the west to the east of the town, completely ignoring the pedestrians on the road. He used his horse's hooves to clear a path, startling the people on the road into cursing. Before the curses had died down, he ran back from the east. Immediately in the middle of the street, he looked at a 2-story wooden building and muttered, "This is the most luxurious one." Chapter 746. The so-called most luxurious was only because it was much bigger than the other houses. Yu Qianqiu had just jumped off his horse when Bodo and the others arrived. Yu Qianqiu pointed inside and said, "We'll rest here." With Immortal Crocodile leading the way, the others also dismounted. Under the gazes of the people on the street, Bodo and the other 3 vigilantly gripped the knives on their waists. Yu Qianqiu looked at the knives on his waist and said disapprovingly, "What's wrong? Are you afraid that there'll be danger if you rest here?" Bodo lowered his head slightly and said in a low voice, "This shop is owned by the Shizi, we cannibals can't afford to rest here." What he meant was that the Shizi would rip them off in terms of price. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and stretched out his hand. "Didn't you bring money? Give me the money pouch." Bodo was startled, but out of respect for this brave warrior who could kill the lake monster, he untied a small cloth pouch from his waist and handed it to him. Yu Qianqiu was about to take it when he heard someone yell, "How dare you scare my people by horse racing in town?" 7 or 8 people quickly rushed over. Just as Yu Qianqiu was about to ask what they were up to, the leader of the group suddenly snatched the money pouch from Bodo's hand. Weighing the pouch in his hand, he looked at Yu Qianqiu in disdain. "This pouch of money belongs to us. We'll take it as you scaring our people." Before he could finish, there was a flash of cold light, followed by a streak of blood. Before anyone could see what was going on, they found that the person's hand that was holding the money pouch was gone, leaving only a bare arm. Blood suddenly spurted out from the dark red stump. The knife on Yuchincho's waist had moved to his right hand at some point, and his left hand was holding Bodo's money pouch with a severed hand. His movements were so fast that the person only realized that his hand had been cut off when blood spurted out of his hand. Ah! Before he could finish screaming, he saw a cold light flash by, and a large head flew into the air. Yuchincho raised his leg and kicked the man's chest, sending him flying a few meters away. Blood spurted out from the wound on his neck. Yuchincho didn't even bother to look at it. He pulled off the broken hand that was holding onto the money pouch and muttered, "What AF * king problem, asking for a beating." In just a few moments, the people on the street who were prepared to watch the show were all stunned. Boli and the other three were already dumbfounded. The street instantly became very quiet. Immortal Lord Crocodile's face also twitched slightly. He thought to himself, how ruthless. The other 7 people who had come with the dead person only now realized that their clansman had been killed. Their eyes turned red, and without any warning, they all pulled out their knives and charged at Yuchincho. Yuchincho raised his head slightly and charged into the crowd with quick steps. A series of punches, kicks, and saber lights danced in the air. 7 heads flew up and 7 corpses fell to the street with blood spurting out from their mouths. Their bodies were still twitching, and only after a long while did they stop moving. Yuchincho shook off the blood on his knife and put it away without a change in expression, as if nothing had happened. To him, killing a few mortals was not something to be happy about. The quiet street suddenly burst into an uproar, and everyone looked at Yuchincho with reverence. Boli and the other 3 looked at Yuchincho with admiration. He was indeed the warrior who killed the lake monster. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyelids twitched uncontrollably. He couldn't help but want to ask this kid what he had been doing before he started cultivating. The clean and sharp close-range combat just now was very familiar, and had nothing to do with the level of his cultivation. It was normal for people to die in battles between tribes. In addition, there were no legal restrictions, so it was completely up to the winner to decide. The loser could just blame it on his bad luck and take revenge if he had the ability. Under everyone's gaze, Yuchincho expressionlessly carried the money bag and entered the shop. The people who were standing at the entrance to watch the show quickly retreated. Boli and the other 3 led the horses into the small alley next to the shop. They found the stable and placed the fodder for the horses before returning. When they entered the shop, they saw that Yuchincho and Immortal Lord Crocodile had already taken a seat. The table was filled with sumptuous meat dishes. Yuchincho waved them over and let them eat to their heart's content. Boli and the other 3 were still a little worried. After all, things wouldn't be so peaceful outside. After all, Yuchincho had killed the people of the second largest tribe in the area, the Wasi tribe. Yuchincho tasted everything and found that it didn't taste very good. He immediately lost his appetite. Immortal Lord Crocodile obviously didn't like these things either. He casually took a bite and threw it aside. He turned to stare at Yuchincho and transmitted his voice. "Kid, you killed to your heart's content. Have you ever thought about the entire cannibal tribe? Why? Are you worried about those old lovers who accompany you every night?" Yuchincho said nonchalantly. "Don't worry. I have my own plans." While transmitting his voice, he poured all the money in the bag onto the table. There were 2 gold coins and hundreds of silver coins. Neither of them had ever seen the currency used in this continent before. They each picked up a piece and examined it. The printing was quite exquisite. There were portraits on both sides of the coin. One side was a man with a cold face, and the other side was a beautiful woman. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at the portraits on both sides of the coin and could not help but snort. Yuchincho was stunned. After looking at the coin again, he transmitted his voice. Could it be Yi Xiao and Ji Wu? Who else could it be other than them? Tisk tsk. So Ji Wu is a beautiful woman. Yu Qianqiu exclaimed. He looked back at Boli and asked, how long will this money last us? Boli put down the deer steak in his hand and said embarrassedly, 1 gold coin can be exchanged for 100 silver coins. There are about 300 silver coins here. If we use them sparingly, we should be able to use them until the end of the preliminary round. This is all the money left in the clan. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. It seemed that the cannibals were not very well off. But it did not matter, he had money. With that thought in mind, he reached out and lifted the fur skirt around his waist. Under Immortal Lord Crocodile's suspicious gaze, he grabbed a handful of things and placed them on the table. A pile of shiny golden objects appeared on the table. Everyone at the table was dumbfounded. It turned out that what Yu Qianqiu had taken out were shiny gold coins. They seemed to be newly minted coins. Without saying anything, Yu Qianqiu took out another 5 or 6 handfuls of coins and put them on the table. Immortal Lord Crocodile reached out and grabbed a few pieces to verify their authenticity. They were all genuine. The engraved heads were exactly the same as the ones he had seen before. They did not look like replicas. Where did you get so many gold coins? Immortal Lord Crocodile asked in surprise. My master gave them to me, Yu Qianqiu said perfunctorily. Immortal Lord Crocodile did not doubt this answer. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu had casually made these coins using the gold seal, and the purity of these gold coins was quite high. Yu Qianqiu put all the coins on the table and in Immortal Lord Crocodile's hands into a money bag. He threw it to the dumbfounded Boli and smiled. Now you don't have to worry about money. Whatever he wanted to eat, he just let it go. I'm going to find a place to pee. He secretly sent a voice transmission to Immortal Lord Crocodile. I'm going to send the old and young of the cannibals away. I'll be back soon. With that, he left. About 2 hours later, they saw him walk in. Boli and the others looked at each other. They did not know where he had gone to pee for such a long time. They were already full. Immortal Lord Crocodile asked via voice transmission, you sent them all out of the Holy East Lands. Seeing Yu Qianqiu nod slightly, he did not say anything else. In fact, Yu Qianqiu had sent all the cannibals to Utopia. It was just that it was not convenient for him to say it. After eating, the bill went smoothly. There was no haggling. He only spent 1 silver coin after ordering so much meat. Even Boli and the others felt it was strange. It seemed a little too cheap. Yu Qianqiu did not think much of it. He guessed that the shopkeeper was frightened by his killing move. Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed coldly, as if he knew something. Just as they reached the door of the store, Boli suddenly stopped and said, we don't need to participate in this fence meeting anymore. They all turned around and looked at him, not knowing why he said that. Boli raised the bulging money bag in his hand and said, this much gold is enough for our people to live for many years. More importantly, we just offended the Wasi tribe. They will definitely take revenge on us. We need to go back and protect our people. The other 3 clansmen looked at each other and nodded their heads solemnly. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu with a mocking expression, as if saying, who asked you to kill so many people? Who asked you to give them so many gold coins? Who asked you to send the cannibals away? Now you're getting your retribution, aren't you? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He did not expect himself to make a fool of himself. His face darkened as he said, no, we have to participate in the fence meeting. Chapter 747. There were many reasons why Yu Qianqiu had to go to the fence meeting. The mortals here definitely could not see the purple fire, so he had to contact the immortals here to find out. If ordinary immortals did not know, then he had to find a way to find high-level immortals in the immortal cities. If even the high-level immortals in the immortal cities did not know, then the purple fire was very likely hidden underground. It was much more troublesome to find things underground than above ground. He would probably have to find the meditation cultivators who lived here for a long time. And to meditate here, he still had to find the immortals in the immortal world to find out where the entrance to the underground was. In short, to find the purple fire, he could not avoid interacting with the immortals here. The fence meeting was a good place to start. There was another thing that he was thinking about. What would happen if Bai Changchun went to challenge the immortal lords and the netherworld generals? Although he did not seem to care, he was actually very conflicted and anxious to find out more information. However, with his and Immortal Lord Crocodile's current cultivation, the Eastern Holy Land was not a place for them to act presumptuously. They could only advance step by step and find out more information. Thus, he had to go to the fence meeting. Seeing that he was unhappy, Boli asked in surprise, "Why must we go to the fence meeting?" He could not understand. Participating in the fence meeting was a very dangerous thing. Unless they had no other choice, which tribe would be willing to take such a risk? Now that they had the conditions to not participate, wasn't that a good thing? "You idiot!" Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart, but his face showed a pained expression. He pointed at Boli and the others and lectured, "No wonder the cannibals have never been strong. It's because our tribesmen flatter men like you who do not know how to be prepared for danger in times of peace. Just because of a bag of gold, you lost your fighting spirit and did not think about improving. Isn't it better to earn more gold for your tribesmen? If you have the ability to earn more gold than your tribesmen can spend in a few lifetimes, then the future generations of cannibal warriors can protect their tribesmen and reproduce without having to bleed and die for the fence meeting. Many generations of warriors. How many tribesmen can you produce? A bunch of cowards, you disappoint me. What bullsh *t reason?" Immortal Lord Crocodile's expression twitched as he turned his head to the side, not wanting to listen anymore. However, Boli and the others thought the same. They were reprimanded until their faces turned red and they lowered their heads in shame. After a while, Boli raised his head and asked, "What if the Wasi retaliate against our people?" "Don't worry about it." Yu Qianqiu patted his chest confidently and said, "I just went to pee and bumped into a tile. The Wasi said that because they are true warriors, they will defeat us fair and square at the fence, and then they will take revenge on your people. If they lose, they will accept their defeat wholeheartedly and will not pursue this matter any further. They will treat it as if it never happened." Boli and the other three looked at each other. Suddenly, one of them asked in a weak voice, "What if we don't get to fight against the Swaxi? Why are there so many ifs?" Yu Qianqiu roared angrily. He pointed at them and said, "A bunch of cowards, I'm ashamed to be associated with you, and you call yourselves warriors of the cannibal tribe. If you want it back, go back and return the gold coins to me." Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed and shook his head. He had seen shameless people, but never so shameless. Just now, he said he was giving them gold coins, and now he wanted them back. Boli clutched the money pouch tightly. Gold coins were the lifeline of the tribesmen, they could be used to buy salt for the entire tribe. It had nothing to do with personal honor or disgrace. How could they just give it back? The four's faces turned a little green, angered by the words cowards. The four looked at each other and nodded heavily. Boli said firmly, "Let's go to the fence." "Ah." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. These people really changed their minds quickly. He retracted his hand and the gloominess on his face dissipated. He coughed and said, "All right, it's good that you know your mistake. Let's not waste any more time and hurry on." Under Immortal Lord Crocodile's infinite disdain, Yu Qianqiu took the lead and walked out. The corpses on the street had been taken away by someone, leaving only a few pools of blood. Many people stared at them. Bowley and the other three entered the alley and went to the stable at the back to get the horses. After a while, Yu Qianqiu felt something was wrong. He walked to the alley and looked around, muttering, "Why are they taking so long to get the horses?" Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. "The horses have long been taken away by someone else. Where can they get their own horses?" "What do you mean?" Yu Qianqiu turned back and asked. Then he reacted and quickly walked into the alley. There were more than a dozen horses in the spacious stable, but the 6 they rode were not there. Bowley and the other 3 were anxiously looking around the stable. Yu Qianqiu squinted at the entrance of the stable. He slowly tilted his head and asked Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was slowly approaching, "You knew that our horses were taken away. Why didn't you stop them?" Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. "Who do you think I am? A groom? Do I have the obligation to look after your horses? Besides, you didn't tell me in advance." Yu Qianqiu was about to say something, but he swallowed it. There was no need to get into a fight over such a small matter. Otherwise, he would be the one at a disadvantage. As soon as he turned around, he saw Bowley running over and saying anxiously, "Our horses are gone." "They were taken away, of course they are gone," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. He sneered in his heart. Lost City's expenses were not low, and many tribes would rush to register on the last day to reduce unnecessary expenses. If they missed the registration time, the other tribes would not open the back door again. The person who stole the horses had obviously seen this and wanted to break the cannibals' leg strength so that they would miss the opportunity to compete. Perhaps the other party saw that they were skilled, so they did not do it openly, but secretly. No wonder they paid the bills so cheaply. If this was not trying to hide something, what was it? "Ah!" The 4 screamed. They could roughly guess what was going on. Bowley said anxiously, "Then what should we do? Without the horses, we definitely can't get to Lost City in time to register." "Are you stupid? Why do you have to ask me such a simple thing?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed to the horses in the stable. "Others can take away your horses, but can't you take away other people's horses? Can't you use your brain? This is not good." Bowley looked around the stable and said nervously, "We didn't see who took our horses. What if it wasn't the owner of these horses?" Yu Qianqiu looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot and sneered. "You're crazy, that's nonsense. If we saw who it was, would the horses still be taken away? Stop talking nonsense, who cares who it is, 1 horse each, let's hurry." After that, he went straight into the stable, untied the ropes, and pulled out 2 horses. He gave one to Immortal Crocodile and jumped on the horse's back. Bowley and the other 3 were not as mentally strong as him. He could even be a thief and act like it was a matter of course. They pulled out 1 horse each and ran towards the street. Before leaving, Immortal Crocodile saw Yu Qianqiu bend his finger and flicked a red light into the stable. It quickly disappeared into the mountain of fodder, and he did not know what Yu Qianqiu was trying to do. Rushing onto the street, Yu Qianqiu swung his pigtails and opened a path in front of the horse, scaring the pedestrians on the street and causing them to dodge and panic. Just as the sound of horse hooves sounded, several people ran out of the shop and chased after them. "Horse thieves, stop right there." Bowley and the other 3 followed behind Yu Qianqiu with a guilty conscience and quickly rushed out of the town. Not long after they rushed out of the town, they suddenly felt the sky change color. It was a little red, and the town behind them screamed, "Fire! Put out the fire! Quick, put out the fire!" Bowley and the other 3 looked back and were instantly shocked. What a huge fire! It soared into the sky, and the ferocious fire quickly spread from the center of the town to the whole town. Inside the town, screams and screams could be heard incessantly. A large group of people rushed out of the town like a colony of ants, rolling and crawling as they escaped from the town. It was unknown how many people could not escape and would die in the sea of fire. Bolly and the other three felt a lingering fear when they saw this scene. If they had come out a little later, they might not have been able to come out again. Immortal Crocodile retracted his gaze from the raging fire in the small town and looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was galloping forward on his horse. Among the 6 of them, he was the only one who didn't turn back to look at the commotion behind him. Immortal Crocodile immediately transmitted his voice. Although they are unruly people, your punishment is a little too much. After all, they are just ignorant mortals. Why implicate so many innocent people? Oh. It seems that you are quite sympathetic. I was afraid that there were too few people who died to move your apathetic heart. Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned back, his eyes cold, and transmitted his voice coldly. This fire is for you to see. I just want to tell you that we are mutually beneficial and equal. No one owes anyone anything. Everyone should help each other. What happened before really hurt me. You could have stopped others from taking our horses away, but you turned a blind eye to it as if it had nothing to do with you. Can I understand that you are hindering me? Or are you trying to make fun of me? I don't think something like this should happen between us. You should understand now that those people who did not escape the sea of fire were actually killed by you. If you could have stopped our horses from being stolen, then these people would have lived a good life. I hope that these people's deaths can be a small reminder to you that there should not be any unpleasant things between us. We still have a long way to go. You and I need to take this as a warning. Immortal Crocodile's eyes flashed with a trace of emotion. This kind of reminder would be unforgettable even if he was cold-hearted. However, he snorted coldly. You were the one who killed them, but you want to implicate me. What nonsense. No matter what he said, Yu Qianqiu did not say anything else. He turned back and urged the horse forward. Immortal Crocodile also kept quiet. The 6 of them galloped quickly, and the burning town gradually disappeared behind them, the Rhone Kingdom's great snow mountain. Under the bright sun, the snow-capped peaks were white, and the magnificent ice palace reflected a psychedelic color. Yan Zhuixing, dressed in a black robe, slowly walked out of the ice palace's gate. He walked expressionlessly to the ice cliff and stopped. If he took another step forward, it would be a bottomless abyss. There was mist rising from the ice cliff, gently lingering around his body. The ice and jade sculptures on the cliff were crystal clear. The steep ice layer at the bottom of the cliff, which looked like it was chiseled by knives and axes, showed a magnificent light blue color. Coupled with the mist, it was like a paradise on earth. Although it was under the bright sun, Yan Zhuixing, who stood in the mist on the ice cliff, gave people a gloomy and terrifying feeling. His cold eyes stared into the distance without moving. Bing Qingzi was in the middle of the gate of the ice palace, with Yan Bugui, Man Hu, and Third Xian on both sides. They were all staring at the motionless black figure in front of the ice cliff. What's wrong with Xing? Yan Bugui asked Bing Qingzi uneasily. He should have been happy to see Yan Zhuixing come out with all 4 limbs intact. Who knew that Yan Zhuixing, who came out of the secret chamber in the belly of the mountain, would turn a blind eye to his father? He brushed past him stiffly, forcing the joy on his face to be replaced by uneasiness. Suddenly, Yan Zhuixing, who was in front of the ice cliff, opened his arms. The mist around his body was quickly shaken off. Ah! He looked up to the sky and roared crazily. His voice was hoarse and deep. It didn't sound like a human's voice at all. It was like the voice of an ancient fierce beast. The tone of the voice changed from the bottom of the abyss, as if a magical beast that had been sleeping for countless years was about to wake up. The roar became more and more brutal and louder. It scared the surrounding snow-capped peaks to the point that avalanches occurred one after another. The rumbling sound reverberated everywhere. Everyone inside the gate of the ice palace felt that the sound could penetrate their bodies and pull their hearts and lungs. Their faces changed dramatically. Except for Bing Qingzi, who could still stand still, the others were all shaky and had a splitting headache. They covered their ears with their hands and tried their best to resist, but they couldn't stop the sound wave from invading. In the end, even Bing Qingzi's face began to turn pale. He suddenly raised his head and found that cracks also appeared in the ice palace. He immediately yelled, "Yan Zhuixing, control yourself." More than half of the ice cliff, which already had a large area of cracks, collapsed. Yan Zhuixing, who was standing in front of the cliff, fell into the abyss. The roar continued to come from below and suddenly stopped. The people inside the gate finally heaved a sigh of relief. That sound was too uncomfortable. Not to mention their splitting headache, their internal organs were all messed up, giving them a feeling that death was better than living. Before they could react, Bing Qingzi had already teleported to the sky above the abyss and stared down. Suddenly, Bing Qingzi's pupils shrank and he yelled angrily, "Yan Zhuixing." Before he could finish his words, a shadow shot out from the bottom of the cliff and collided with Bing Qingzi with a majestic and unparalleled aura. With a loud bang, Bing Qingzi, who quickly pushed out his palms to block the attack, let out a muffled groan and spat out a mouthful of blood. He was sent flying dozens of meters away. The shadow appeared. Yan Zhuixing, who was wearing a black robe, had disheveled hair and his face couldn't be seen clearly. He was floating above the abyss in a horse stance. His movements were like a bow shooting a huge eagle. His whole body was surrounded by black murderous aura. One of his raised fists was shrouded in black light. Under his disheveled hair, a deep voice came out slowly, "Devil Fist." Chapter 748. It was quiet inside and outside the ice palace. Everyone in the ice palace who had yet to recover from the heart-wrenching roar were all dumbfounded. They couldn't believe the scene in front of them. Yan Zhuixing actually attacked his master, Bing Qingzi. The scariest thing was that he actually injured Bing Qingzi with just one punch. Everyone clearly saw the scene of Bing Qingzi vomiting blood. Bing Qingzi had the cultivation of late divine transformation realm. How many people in the world could injure him? Man Hu and his brothers quickly flew to the sky and anxiously checked on their master's injury. Yan Bugui and Third Exian quickly flew to the side of Yan Zhuixing, whose hair was disheveled. Yan Bugui looked at Bing Qingzi, who was squinting his eyes, and anxiously scolded Yan Zhuixing, "Are you crazy? How dare you attack your master?" The black light circulating on Yan Zhuixing's fist disappeared and the black aura surrounding his body also retracted back into his body. He put down his fist that was raised to the sky and slowly raised his head. His long black hair flowed like silk and gently rested on his shoulders. The hairband that bound his hair was no longer there. Half of his face was covered by his long hair while the other half of his face was staring at Yan Bugui emotionlessly with his cold eyes. Yan Bugui was startled by his son's stare. His heart trembled and he was instantly speechless. "Master, are you okay?" Man Hu and his brothers asked anxiously. Bing Qingzi raised his hand and wiped the corner of his mouth. A smear of bright red was smeared on his palm. He looked down with a complicated expression and slowly shook his head. "Don't worry, I'm fine." Yan Zhuixing's sudden attack didn't really injure him, but the power of that punch really shocked him. Logically speaking, he should have been able to block Yan Zhuixing's punch with his cultivation. However, the explosive power contained in Yan Zhuixing's punch was frighteningly powerful. It gave people the illusion that no matter how high their cultivation was, they would not be able to withstand it. It directly blasted through the defense that he had put up to defend and injured him. The Jin Yuan in Bing Qingzi's body was still faintly dispersing. It was not that Yan Zhuixing's cultivation was higher than his. In fact, there was still a long way to go. However, the power in this punch was quite strange and overbearing. The powerful penetrating power and explosive power perfectly combined together. It was very frightening. It could not be judged by the level of cultivation. Yan Zhuixing raised his head and looked at the sky. With a swoosh, he appeared in front of Bing Qingzi with a teleportation. The lower half of his face was abnormally cold, especially his eyes, which were devoid of any emotion. Man Hu furiously pointed at Yan Zhuixing and shouted, "Yan Zhuixing, you ungrateful bastard, you actually dared to attack Master. If it wasn't for Master, how could you be where you are today? If not for Master, you would have lost your life in Spirit Fong Valley." Bing Qingzi raised his hand slightly and stopped him from continuing. He stared at Yan Zhuixing and asked, "What happened just now?" To be honest, he was not happy that Yan Zhuixing attacked him. It was just that he was more composed than his disciple. A bitter smile appeared on the lower half of his face under his long hair. He cupped his hands at them and said, "Master, senior brothers, please forgive me. I don't know what happened just now. I couldn't control myself and attacked Master recklessly." The Master and disciples looked at each other speechlessly. The angry expression on their faces gradually eased. They all suspected that there was something wrong with this demonic art. Bing Qingzi stared at Yan Zhuixing and said with an abnormally heavy expression, "Isn't it a little too fast to break through to early spirit severing realm in such a short time? Why do I feel that it's a little abnormal? Did you notice anything unusual?" Man Hu and the others were shocked. They quickly looked at Yan Zhuixing and realized that they could no longer see through his cultivation. The senior and junior brothers looked at each other in shock. It was too unbelievable that he could break through to early spirit severing realm in such a short time. Yan Zhuixing muttered slowly, "It's too fast. I don't know what's going on either. According to the demonic book, it would take at least 10 years to reach my current cultivation. It's impossible to be so fast. However, when I was cultivating, I seemed to feel a magical power in my body. Once I started cultivating demonic arts, that magical power guided me to break through the shackles and solved all the doubts I had when I was cultivating. It made my cultivation advance by leaps and bounds. It's like 1,000 miles in a day. It's so fast that I can't even believe it myself." Not to mention Man Hu and the others, even Bing Qingzi felt as if he had heard a fantasy. He looked at Yan Zhuixing with an indescribable expression. Bing Qingzi sighed slightly and said, "I can't give you any advice on this. You can only rely on yourself to figure it out slowly. If you discover that something is amiss, it is better to stop first and think about it clearly before continuing to cultivate. Do not be impatient for quick results. Logically speaking, I should be happy that your cultivation is progressing at a godly speed, but I keep feeling that something is wrong. It is simply too fast. You should be more careful." Yan Zhuixing bowed slightly as if he was obeying orders. He said, "It's because I found something wrong that I stopped cultivating secretly. I'm going to think carefully about where the problem is. Just now, I rashly attacked Master because of this magical power. I couldn't help it at that moment. Please forgive me, Master." "Since you couldn't help it, don't mention it again." Bing Qingzi's eyes flickered. He said, "The power of that punch just now is indeed extraordinary. With your early spirit severing realm cultivation, you can actually break through my defense. It seems that you have mastered the demonic fist that matches spirit severing realm. I'm looking forward to the power of your great demonic fist." "Yes." Yan Zhuixing put on an obedient look. In fact, when he attacked Bing Qingzi just now, it wasn't because he couldn't help it. It was because of the rapid growth of his cultivation. He was overconfident and wanted to find someone to test the power of his demonic fist. When he fell off the ice cliff, he suddenly saw Bing Qingzi appear in the sky. He suddenly had an idea. He couldn't test the power of the demonic fist if his cultivation was too low. Bing Qingzi's cultivation was perfect for him to test. However, he was also worried that the demonic fist would be too overbearing and seriously injure Bing Qingzi as described in the demonic book. After all, he still had to rely on Bing Qingzi's power in the future. He couldn't be reckless. Therefore, he only used 60% of his strength. As a result, Bing Qingzi was still slightly injured. At this moment, he was inexplicably surprised. However, he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he said that he couldn't help it. Bing Qingzi heaved a sigh of relief and turned to Man Hu. "How's the situation in the cultivation world recently?" He asked, "What's the situation in the cultivation world?" Recently, he had been guarding Yan Juixing and knew little about the situation in the cultivation world. Therefore, he asked this question. Man Hu immediately bowed and reported, after the countries joined hands and suffered losses in the cultivation world of Hua Xia, they have temporarily stopped fighting. They are discussing with each other about the next attack. Generally speaking, the cultivation world is still peaceful. However, there are some movements in the secular world. Firstly, the rebel army supported by Yu Qianqiu has already swept 2/3 of the territory. If there are no other accidents, the outcome is already a foregone conclusion. Secondly, the emperor of Baiwan country has passed away. The new crown prince is about to succeed the throne. Apart from these, there are no movements for now. Bing Qingzi nodded slightly without saying anything. Yan Juixing, who had been listening attentively, asked indifferently with killing intent flashing in his eyes, "Eldest senior brother, is there any news about Yu Qianqiu in the cultivation world recently?" Everyone knew the resentment between him and Yu Qianqiu. It could be said that the hatred between them was getting deeper and deeper. It had reached the point where one of them would not stop until one of them died. However, that Yu Qianqiu could be considered to be worthy of admiration. Yan Juixing's devil arts were strange and overbearing, yet he had suffered a loss at Yu Qianqiu's hands time and time again. The last time, Yu Qianqiu had even almost lost his life. Man Hu took a deep look at him and said after a pause, "Our ice palace has been paying attention to the news of Yu Qianqiu. However, that guy seems to have disappeared. Not to mention the countries, even the cultivation world of Hua Xia doesn't have any news about him. We don't know where he has gone." Yu Qianqiu. Yan Juixing slowly raised his broken and regenerated arm. He clenched his fists so hard that cracking sounds could be heard. He gritted his teeth and said, "I'm destined to compete with you in this life. Either you die or I live. You can't hide even if you want to." Then he suddenly turned around and cupped his hands at Bing Qingzi. "I want to go out and find Yu Qianqiu for revenge." Bing Qingzi frowned and said in a low voice, "Don't be reckless. There must be something we don't know about Yu Qianqiu, who can make a name for himself in the cultivation world with the cultivation of crossing calamity stage. Moreover, he is from the demon ghost territory. If something happens to him, the current torture envoy of the demon ghost territory, Niu Yud, will definitely not ignore it. You don't have to take revenge now. When you are successful in your demonic cultivation and no one in the world can stop you, Yu Qianqiu will be at your mercy. If you go out now and encounter an accident, you won't be so lucky every time." The ending was nothing but a warning to him, "I can't save you in time every time. Master, please understand." Yan Juixing bowed deeply and said, "As long as Yu Qianqiu doesn't die, I will feel like I have a fishbone stuck in my throat. What's more, with my current cultivation and the new demonic cultivation, I'm confident that I can escape from anyone even if I encounter an accident. Master, please let me go out of the mountain to avenge this deep hatred." You. Bing Qingzi knew he couldn't persuade him since he was so resolute, but he couldn't ask him to do it as a normal master and disciple relationship. Alas. He could only let out a long sigh and flashed into the ice palace, as if to say, "Do as you see fit." The other disciples also frowned as they looked at each other. Man Hu reminded, "Yu Qianqiu comes and goes like a ghost. Even if you leave the mountain, how will you be able to find him in this vast world?" If I can't find him, I'll look for him slowly. I don't believe he will hide forever. If it's really impossible, as long as he's alive, I'll have a way to force him out. After Yan Zhuixing finished his words, he turned into a shadow and disappeared into the distance. The 6 riders galloped in a straight line on the vast lush plain. Green plants were rarely seen in the surroundings. Occasionally, they could see clusters of drought-resistant short thorns. 6 surging trails of yellow dust followed behind the galloping horse hooves. Yu Qianqiu swung his braids around in a flashy manner as he looked around. He clicked his tongue in admiration. Such a flat and vast yellow plain was truly rare. Under the setting sun, the lush plain was filled with a refreshing color. Between the heaven and the earth, there was a warm orange color. The rolling yellow dust could also be seen in the distance. The sound of horse hooves could be heard. Obviously, it was a passerby who had the same goal as them. Along the way, they galloped without any scruples. Soon, a green dot appeared in the distance. As the green dot gradually expanded in their sight, the magnificent city hidden behind the green forest appeared. After passing through the forest, there were farmlands on both sides of the road. There were thriving crops, and there was a small river that was 2 to 3 meters wide. Many people were busy working on it. Warriors from many tribes gathered on this road. They slowed down and came to the ancient lush wall that was more than 10 meters tall. A group of people surrounded the city gate. They were all warriors from various tribes who came to register. After going through the normal procedures, they would be let in by the city guards. As they approached the city gate, Boli and the other 3 tribesmen immediately looked around. Yu Qianqiu knew what they were looking for. They were looking for the tribesmen who lived in the city. They were the warriors who had participated in the fence meet. They had obtained the right to live in the city. Without the help of the tribesmen who lived in the city, it was impossible to register for the competition. The main purpose was to prevent people from disrupting the order in the city. This rule was very cruel. If Yu Qianqiu and the others were brought in by the cannibals who lived in the city, once Yu Qianqiu and the others caused trouble, the entire cannibal tribe would be implicated. It was said that the punishment was very severe. Therefore, under normal circumstances, for the safety of the tribesmen, no tribesman would easily bring outsiders into the city. This also prevented people from sneaking into the city to cause trouble. It was because of this reason that Yu Qianqiu decided to get close to the cannibals. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the patience to waste time with the cannibals. He would have disguised himself as a tribesman and entered the city long ago. Suddenly, someone jumped up and waved at the noisy city gate. Boli! Boli! Yu Qianqiu glanced over and saw a tall man wearing simple and crude clothes squeezing through the crowd. Boli and the other tribesmen shouted in surprise, "Guan!" They jumped down from their horses and hugged each other, patting each other's shoulders. They seemed very happy. Yu Qianqiu did not want to be outdone. He jumped down from his horse and opened his arms, pretending to hug them passionately. He smiled and patted their shoulders. He also winked at Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was still on his horse. It seemed to be saying, "Don't sit there alone, okay? It will make others suspicious." Immortal Lord Crocodile's face twitched, but he still forced a smile. He jumped down from his horse and pretended to be happy to see his tribesmen, just like Yu Qianqiu. Secretly, he gritted his teeth and sent a voice transmission. "You brat, aren't you tired of doing such things all day long? TSK. Don't be surprised." Yu Qianqiu replied angrily, "If you don't do such things, it will attract the attention of the celestial masters in the city, and they will chase us everywhere. That will be really tiring." His words were crude, but he was right. Immortal Lord Crocodile was tongue-tied and speechless. He finally understood that what this guy said was the truth. It would be better for him to look for less stimulation in the future. Chapter 749. Guin, who was chatting with Bolly and the other three, noticed two unfamiliar faces joining them. He could not help but be startled, but from the way they were dressed, they were undoubtedly from the cannibals' tribe. He couldn't help but say, "Bolly, they." Bolly grabbed his wrist and whispered. The elders agreed. "Bring us into the city first, and we'll tell you what happened later." Guin looked solemnly at the other three tribesmen. Seeing that they were nodding, he immediately calmed down and brought the 6 people with the horses to register. When it was their turn to register, Guin showed his token to the registration staff at the city gate and successfully registered them. Immortal Lord Crocodile's name was changed to Dinyo, while the others' names remained the same. After all, the names of the others, including Yu Qianqiu, would not attract much attention. Only Immortal Lord Crocodile's name was famous in the immortal world, so he had to change his name. As for why he was called Dinyo, it was naturally because someone was called Nyo Yud. After passing through the city gate, a bustling city that was different from the lush plain outside appeared in front of everyone. The wide streets were filled with exquisitely built, simple, and luxurious shops. Bolly and the others were a little dazzled. Immortal Lord Crocodile's face was full of emotion. He probably did not expect that a city would appear in this place sealed off by the heaven and earth formation. The pedestrians on the streets could easily distinguish between those who were from the city and those who were from other tribes. First, there was the difference in clothing. The people in the city all wore cloth clothes, and few would wear things like animal skins. Second, there was the difference in their behavior. Those who walked on the streets and kept looking around, as if everything was new to them. Just like Yu Qianqiu, who had a head full of pigtails, one could tell at a glance that they were foreigners. Most of the people in the city who wore cloth clothes looked at the tribesmen with disdain. If not for the fact that the city lord needed these people to participate in the triennial fence meeting, they would have chased all these natives out of the city. Guin knew that his tribesmen rarely had the opportunity to enter, so he introduced the entire Lust Plain in detail as he walked. Lust City's land area was not small, as could be seen from the more than 300,000 permanent residents within the city. However, tribal warriors like Guin, who had obtained residency rights, did the dirtiest and most tiring chores in the city, making up less than 1/20th of the city's population. This was equivalent to more than 10,000 warriors from various tribes serving the 300,000 locals in the city. The so-called city dwellers were actually the nobles and their family members who managed the various cities in the Holy East Land. Even if they did nothing every month, they could still receive 1 gold coin per head, which was equivalent to 100 silver coins. And tribal warriors like Guin, who had obtained residency rights, were similar to those who worked in the city. However, even if they worked themselves to death, they would only be able to earn 50 silver coins a month at most. Most of them would only earn around 20 silver coins a month. But relatively speaking, it was still much better than hunting in the tribe. However, due to the high cost of living in the city, the warriors of each tribe only had a few silver coins left after filling their stomachs. In fact, their lives were far from being as comfortable as they were in the tribe. As long as they could hunt enough prey in the tribe, their lives were still relatively comfortable. In short, their lives were much worse than when they were in the tribe. However, the tribesmen needed them to stay in the city, because salt could only be bought in the city. Usually, the tribesmen were not allowed to enter the city. Even if there was extra game to sell, they could only rely on the tribesmen who were struggling in the city to do it. Yu Qianqiu felt that the immortals' rule and management of the city and beyond were a little ridiculous. Because the entire continent was sealed by the heaven and earth Qianquan formation, ordinary people couldn't get their hands on salt. After all, people couldn't live without salt, and the immortals relied on salt to rule and manage the entire continent. These so-called city dwellers actually lived in a huge cage. From birth to death, almost no one could take a step out of the city. Only those who were restricted to farming outside the city walls and providing the city with fresh fruits and vegetables were allowed to enter and leave the walled city. However, they were only able to leave the city to work in the fields. Although there was only a wall between the city and the city, it was like two different worlds. The city dwellers thought that they lived a decent life, but in fact, they paid for their lifelong freedom. They would never know how rich and colorful the outside world was, and how vast the outside world was. As for the tribes living outside, they maintained the most primitive way of life without being disturbed. Yu Qianqiu couldn't figure out what these trapped immortals wanted. Why did they want to turn the continent into two extremes? What puzzled Yu Qianqiu the most was, what was the purpose of the fence gathering? What were the 100 warriors who won every competition doing in the immortal city? The group was chatting as they walked. Suddenly, two boys crossed the street. When one of them saw Yu Qianqiu, he tugged on the other boy's sleeve and gestured for him to look at Yu Qianqiu. The two boys were about 7 or 8 years old. They looked at Yu Qianqiu as if they were looking at a monster, and they couldn't help but laugh out loud. The group stopped in their tracks. They didn't know what the two children were laughing about. Yu Qianqiu was even more confused. Could it be that his temperament was so extraordinary that even the children could tell that he was a fake native? Sigh. The children's eyes were pure and they could tell people apart. Yu Qianqiu looked around proudly, showing off his extraordinary temperament. Unexpectedly, the two children looked at each other and smiled wickedly. They spat a few times, and only stopped when the saliva in their mouths was dry. Immortal Crocodile raised half of his eyebrows. The expressions on his face were very colorful. He seemed very happy to see Yu Qianqiu being treated like this. Boli and the others looked at each other, a little confused. Guan's expression didn't look good. Yu Qianqiu wasn't wearing any clothes. Looking at the spit on his body, he was a little confused. He didn't know what this meant. He comforted himself. Perhaps this was similar to the water splashing festival in Yunnan. It was a kind of etiquette. It meant that I was very popular with children. I'll endure it. If I really can't endure it, I'll just spit on them. However, illusions were always easily shattered. The ridicule of the passers-by made Yu Qianqiu feel that something was wrong. Yu Qianqiu pulled a long face and asked, "Little brat, why did you spit on me?" One of the children put his hands on his waist and pointed at Yu Qianqiu. He said disdainfully, "You're so small, and yet you came to participate in the fence meeting. Aren't you afraid of embarrassing yourself? Damn native, scram back to where you came from." Am I small? Yu Qianqiu asked himself. His height was not bad. But when he looked back at Boli and the others, he immediately understood. His height was not bad outside, but compared to the warriors of various tribes who were more than 2 meters tall, he was indeed thin and short. Son of AB *TCH, you think that I'm easy to bully because I'm small. How dare you spit on me? Yu Qianqiu's face completely darkened. Who knew that he wasn't the only one being bullied by these two children? The other child ran in front of Guan and pointed at his braided hair. He said, "You're obviously a poor and dirty native, but you still want to learn to wear our clothes. Scram out of Lust City. Tui tui." He started to spit on Guan again. Obviously, the miserable Guan was despised by the little boy because he wore cloth clothes and had braided hair. But even so, Guan's face was livid. He didn't dare to flare up because he couldn't afford to offend the natives in the city. When the child facing Yu Qianqiu saw that his companion was spitting to his heart's content, he immediately wanted to compete with him. He started to spit again at Yu Qianqiu. F***CK. Yu Qianqiu looked around and his gaze paused on a small alley on the side of the road. Not only was he not angry, but a warm smile appeared on his face. Facing the spitting saliva, he stretched out his hand and showed the thing in his hand. He smiled amiably and said, "Little friend, do you want it?" That child was stunned for a moment and revealed a stunned look. He wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth and stopped spitting. He even called his companion over. Yu Qianqiu then showed the other child what he was holding in his hand, only to see a handful of gold coins appear in his hand out of nowhere. Little friend, do you want it? Yu Qianqiu once again guided them patiently. One of the children was very shrewish. He put his hands on his waist and said, "Damn native, how do you have so much money? Where did you steal it from? Quickly give it to me, or else I'll report it to the authorities." Sure. Yu Qianqiu raised his index finger and gestured for them to be quiet. He pointed to a small alley on the side of the road and said softly, "Let's go there to talk. I have a small question to ask you. As long as you answer me, I'll give you these gold coins. How about that?" The two children looked at each other slyly and immediately nodded. "Let's go." They ran into the alley first and even waved at Yu Qianqiu, signaling him to come quickly. Yu Qianqiu nodded with a smile and walked in. Boli and the others looked at each other. They didn't know what Yu Qianqiu wanted to do because they didn't see clearly what Yu Qianqiu was holding in his hand. But from what the child said, it seemed to be money. Immortal Crocodile's eyelids twitched. He saw clearly that Yu Qianqiu was holding a handful of gold coins in his hand. Based on his understanding of Yu Qianqiu, he didn't think that Yu Qianqiu would be so friendly as to give gold coins for free. Could it be that this guy would even kill children? After one adult and two children entered the alley, the younger one immediately said, "Ask quickly if you have any questions." Yu Qianqiu looked back at the occasional pedestrians on the street behind him and pointed inside. "Go a little further in. If other adults see that you two children have so many gold coins, they might rob you." The two children agreed tacitly, thinking that Yu Qianqiu's words were very reasonable. They were obviously very familiar with the terrain here. They led Yu Qianqiu into a corner, and the child who spoke earlier said, "Ask here." Chapter 750. Yu Qianqiu looked around and found that it was a dead end with no one around. He raised his eyebrows and rubbed his chin. He stared at the two children and muttered, "I don't know which family these children belong to, but they are so uneducated. Since your parents treat you like treasures and don't want to educate you properly, then you should be prepared to make others unhappy and teach you a lesson. I won't stand on ceremony. I hope I can teach you a lesson in one go." He swung both of his arms and slapped out with both hands. "Paw, paw." The two children, who hadn't reacted in time, blacked out and fainted on the ground. Half of their faces were swollen. Obviously, someone didn't go easy on them. Shame. The dignified torturer of the Phantom region was actually forced to kidnap children and use underhanded methods in the alley. It was really a shame. Yu Qianqiu stared at the two children who had fainted on the ground and shook his head. He coughed and walked out of the alley with a serious face. Boli and the others, who were waiting at the end of the street, craned their heads to look behind him, but didn't see the two children. Boli couldn't help but ask, "Where are those two despicable children?" Yu Qianqiu subconsciously dug his ears, then waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "Under my influence, they realized their mistakes and went home. Let's go. Don't worry about them, they are just ignorant children. There's no need to fuss over them." Immortal Crocodile felt a chill down his spine. What did he mean by no need to fuss over them? With his cultivation, he could clearly hear the sound of the two slaps. He had already guessed what Yu Qianqiu had done. The two children on the ground still hadn't moved. It's good that they know their mistakes. Boli sighed slightly, and they continued to move forward. Guan had lived in the city for a long time, so he naturally felt that something was wrong. He kept sneaking suspicious glances at Yu Qianqiu. However, the latter's face was calm and unperturbed, and he couldn't tell what had happened. Guan felt that he might be thinking too much. The tribesmen were simple and honest, unlike the people in the city who were cunning. Guan lived at the edge of the city. When Yu Qianqiu first arrived, he thought he was in the slums of India from his previous life. If there was a hint of curry in the air, it would be even more so. There were shacks everywhere, and it looked like a slum. The people going in and out were all from different tribes. Obviously, the local city dwellers would not live here. Because the cannibals were good at producing top warriors, the only cannibal representative left in Lost City was Guin. The ones before him were either stronger than Guin and directly passed the finals to the Immortal City, or they were even weaker than Guin and directly died in the fence meet. After tying up the horses outside Guin's shed, Boli and the others went in to take a look. Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Crocodile could imagine how big the space inside was. Even if everyone went in, it would be difficult for them to stand still, so they did not go in. Yu Qianqiu looked around and kept thinking about a problem. Where would everyone stay after coming here? Would everyone have to build a shed to live in during the fence rally? The answer was yes, because the people of the other tribes were building shacks. When Boli and the others came out, their faces were not very good. From the shabby conditions in the shacks, they could see how difficult Guin's life here was. They looked at Guin with admiration. It was precisely because of the sacrifices of generations of warriors here that the tribesmen could live a carefree life. As soon as they came out, they immediately untied the dried meat from the horses' backs and moved it into the shacks. To them, they could not imagine what kind of life a warrior, who mainly ate meat, would live here on a vegetarian diet. In their excitement, they wanted to leave the good things for Guin, but Guin firmly rejected them. His reason was that the tribesmen were going to participate in the fence meet and needed meat to replenish their strength. Yu Qianqiu saw them arguing over a few pieces of meat and could not stand it anymore, so he immediately came out to make the decision. Guin kept the dried meat, and from today onwards, he would pay for everyone's food expenses during the fence meet. He also made a generous decision that everyone would go and have a big meal now. This kind of extravagant behavior was too extravagant and wasteful for Guin, who had been working hard here. Fortunately, Boli and the others knew that he was rich. After Boli secretly told Guin about Yu Qianqiu's heroic deeds, Guin no longer insisted on his own opinion. He just looked at Yu Qianqiu in surprise and doubt. This was a warrior who had lost his memory, and he was very powerful. Not only did he save the entire tribe, but he also took the risk to participate in the fence meet in place of his tribesmen. He was also very rich. Yu Qianqiu looked at Guin and said with a smile, "Guin, you are more familiar with Lost City. Take us to the restaurant with the best food." This. Guin was a little hesitant. Although he had never been to the restaurant with the best food, he had heard others talk about it. However, he had heard that the food there was ridiculously expensive, and not something that ordinary people could afford. Could he really take out that much money? Yu Qianqiu observed his expression and knew what he was worried about. He waved his hand and said with a smile, "Just take us there, you don't have to worry about the money." Under his repeated insistence, Guin had no choice but to lead the group of people there in fear. At this time, Lost City was already shrouded in the twilight, and the streets that extended in all directions were brightly lit. Yu Qianqiu was surprised to find that the entire Lost City was actually illuminated by fluorescent stones. Once night fell, the streets would automatically be brightly lit without the need for lighting, which really saved a lot of trouble. The streets were filled with people, and many well-dressed locals had come out for a walk. It was much more lively than during the day. It seemed that for these people who had never been out of the city, taking a walk was one of the ways to pass the time. There were also many people from various tribes looking around on the streets, and they constantly attracted the locals' looks of disgust. Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Lord Crocodile felt a little strange, for no other reason than that they were dressed too skimpily. It was fine when they were in the cannibals' tribe. After all, everyone was like that. However, here, there were constantly neatly dressed people passing by, and they felt uncomfortable all over. This was especially so when they bumped into the hungry woman who passed by them. When they felt her gaze on them as if she wanted to eat them up, they felt goosebumps all over their bodies. Others could not care less, but for the two of them, they always felt out of place. Even their steps felt unnatural. At this time, Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Lord Crocodile stopped at the same time. The others also stopped, not knowing what they wanted to do. The two of them looked at each other, then at the clothes that Guan was wearing. Their gazes then shifted to a clothing store by the side of the road. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and suddenly waved at everyone. He was the first to enter the clothing store, and Immortal Lord Crocodile followed closely behind him. Bolly and the others looked at each other, not knowing what the two of them wanted to do, but they followed them in. The owner of the store was a kind-looking old man in yellow. When he saw the natives coming in, he was stunned at first, then walked over with a smile and said, "Are you here to buy clothes?" He did not have the snobbish look that most people in the city had. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said unhappily, "Do you have anything else to sell here?" The old man in yellow was stunned again. He looked around his store, then laughed and said, "I didn't expect that after doing business for so long, there would always be problems with the way you speak. Ha! Indeed, I only sell clothes here, nothing else." Yu Qianqiu was about to ask for his best clothes for everyone when he suddenly heard Immortal Lord Crocodile's voice. "Be careful, this person is an immortal cultivator. I've seen him before, but I don't know his name. I can't see through his cultivation." Yu Qianqiu was slightly shocked. Fortunately, Immortal Lord Crocodile was here, or else the other party would be suspicious. He swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Even Immortal Lord Crocodile couldn't see through his cultivation, so it was obvious that the other party's cultivation was at least at the early stage of the Great Immortal Realm. However, it was not good to suddenly run away now. Hence, he put on a weak expression and said, "Old man, can you give each of us the cheapest clothes? I want the cheapest kind." Bolly and the rest felt that it was a little strange. Previously, he seemed to be quite generous, but now... And Gu was grumbling in his heart. He could only buy the cheapest kind of clothes, but he still wanted to eat and drink in the best place. What if he had no money to pay the bill? The old man looked at them and laughed. "It's not easy for you to earn some money. Why do you need to spend money to buy clothes? Isn't it better like this?" Damn it! Immortals were indeed immortals. He even rejected business that came knocking on his door. Yu Qianqiu coughed and sighed. "Old man, you might not know this, but the people in the city look down on us if we don't wear clothes." The old man smiled noncommittally. His eyes flickered. "From the way you talk, you don't sound like the ordinary aborigines. May I know which tribe you are from?" How could Yu Qianqiu tell him the truth? He directly asked the question and said pitifully, "Old man, you are also different from the ordinary people in the city. You don't look down on us like the others. This makes us feel better. May I know your name? I really want to know. You are an interesting person." The old man shook his head and smiled. He said bluntly, "My name is Huang Tian. Huang as in Lost City and Tian as in heaven." After which, he glanced at the figures of the few of them. He turned around and took a few clothes from the rack. He stuffed them into Yu Qianqiu's hands and said, "It's rare to meet such an interesting aborigine like you. These clothes are free and I will give them to you." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He looked at the clothes in his hands and asked suspiciously, "You really don't need money?" Huang Tian nodded his head and smiled. "Really? Thank you, old man." Yu Qianqiu nodded his head and bowed his head to bid farewell. After which, he walked out with the rest of them. It seemed that he was worried that the old man would change his mind. The old man smiled and waved his hand to send them off. Chapter 751. Old monster, I've already found out his name for you. Who is this Huang Tian? He's actually hiding here to act cool. As they walked on the street, Yu Qianqiu transmitted his voice and kept looking back. Immortal Lord Crocodile replied disapprovingly, "I've never heard of this person. Maybe he was a nobody in the celestial world back then. I only met him by chance. Otherwise, if he was really a famous person in the celestial world, there's no way I wouldn't know who he is." Yu Qianqiu thought about it and agreed. They passed by an alley and pulled everyone inside to change clothes. When they came out again, they all looked like humans, except for their hairstyles. It was the first time Boli and the others had worn such clothes, and they felt a little uncomfortable, pulling and tugging at their clothes from time to time. As for Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Lord Crocodile, they felt much better with clothes to cover their bodies. A luxuriously decorated and brightly lit ancient building stood on the side of the street. It was obviously of a higher grade than the surrounding buildings. This building was called Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, and the fluorescent stone signboard said that it was the destination of this trip. After Guan led everyone to the opposite side of Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, he stopped and looked at Yu Qianqiu with anxiety written all over his face. Obviously, he doubted Yu Qianqiu's financial ability. Before entering Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, the tempting aroma of food assaulted their nostrils. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and rubbed his hands excitedly. Eating, drinking, and playing are the four joys of life, and eating ranks first. Everyone, eat to your heart's content today. With a wave of his hand, he looked like a Japanese soldier sweeping through a village. Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately laughed coldly and dampened his mood. "Are you sure you want to eat here?" "Why not?" Yu Qianqiu replied subconsciously. But when he saw the sneer on Immortal Lord Crocodile's face, he immediately understood the meaning behind his words. The lesson from the boutique was still fresh in his mind, and Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant was even more crowded. Don't think that people wouldn't know you're a native just because you changed your clothes, with a super cool hairstyle on your head. With the 7 natives spending here, it would be hard for them not to attract attention. The fragrance that wafted out from the Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant was obviously delicious. However, it was not convenient for him to go in and have a good meal. This was one of the greatest regrets of his life. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head, and the word waste was written all over his face. After smelling the fragrance, Boli and the others swallowed their saliva unabashedly. Guan, on the other hand, said weakly, "Why don't we just forget it? I can still fill my stomach if I go to a cheaper place." He was still thinking about Yu Qianqiu, thinking that Yu Qianqiu did not have enough money. Little did he know that money was not a problem, but a problem of courage. Immortal Lord Crocodile squinted at Yu Qianqiu, his face full of mockery. Suddenly, his expression froze. He saw Yu Qianqiu's eyes shining, so he followed his gaze and saw that Yu Qianqiu was looking at the customers going in and out of the Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. Immortal Lord Crocodile did not see anything and was about to ask him what he was looking at when he saw Yu Qianqiu laughing sinisterly. "Wait for me here, I'll be right back." After saying that, he ran away. The few of them looked at each other, not knowing what he was up to. Just as Boli and the others were waiting until their stomachs were growling, Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was looking around, suddenly paused. Someone sent a voice transmission to him. "Old monster, over here. Bring them over." Tilting his head to look, he saw Yu Qianqiu sneakily stretching his head out from the alley across the street, waving at him. "He's over there, let's go over." Immortal Lord Crocodile called out to the few of them. When they saw Yu Qianqiu hiding in the alley, they were a little confused and walked over. After entering the alley, they found Yu Qianqiu standing in the shadows with his hands behind his back, smiling lewdly at them. "What are you trying to do, kid?" Immortal Lord Crocodile frowned. Yu Qianqiu cackled twice and took out his hands from behind his back. They saw that he was holding a few hats. He said proudly, "It's very simple. How could it be a problem for me? Everyone, just put on your hats and keep your hair in." As he spoke, he handed out hats to everyone. The few of them held a hat in a daze. Bolly and the others did not know why they had to wear hats. Immortal Lord Crocodile was simply impressed by Yu Qianqiu's appearance. It seemed that this guy had gone to get hats just now. They did not know if he had bought them or stolen them. The hat in his hand looked a little old from the looks of it. If you want to have a good meal at Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, quickly put it on. As he spoke, Yu Qianqiu had already put on the hat. As he stuffed his braids, he asked Immortal Lord Crocodile, "Dainu, help me see if I've stuffed it in." Why are you all in a daze? Quickly put it on. What are you waiting for? Don't you want to eat? Immortal Lord Crocodile knew the reason for wearing hats, but Guan's face was full of fear. He thought of the terrible consequences of changing his appearance and eating without paying. Bolly and the others could not figure out what eating had to do with wearing hats. However, under Yu Qianqiu's coercion, they put on the hats properly. TSK. This is a good idea. We can use it more in the future. Let's go and open up a path. Let's eat to our heart's content today. I have money. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and swaggered out of the alley like a local tyrant. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at the swaggering Yu Qianqiu and shook his head with a wry smile. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. He was completely convinced by this fellow. It was just eating. He would not starve to death even if he did not eat. Why did he have to put in so much effort? He was really unscrupulous to achieve his goals. The Heavenly Fragrant Restaurant was beautifully decorated and luxurious. The two ushers at the door led the 7 honored guests in a single file. Although the 2 greeters felt that the 7 distinguished guests did not look like rich people, and their hats did not match their clothes, they felt that the person in front of them was very confident when he walked. They did not dare to slight him and greeted him with a smile. As soon as they entered Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, a graceful young lady greeted them. The high-end and elegant decorations were refreshing and could indeed shock the poor. However, Yu Qianqiu did not care at all. He was here to eat, not to look at their shabby decorations. Moreover, he was really rich and had seen a lot. Naturally, he would not be shocked. However, Bolly and the others were a little dazed. They were used to living in nature and had never seen such a scene. Distinguished guests, do you have a reservation? The graceful young lady beside Yu Qianqiu asked with a graceful smile. I eat according to my mood. I eat when I feel like it. I never make a reservation. Yu Qianqiu glanced upstairs and thought that he would not feel at ease eating downstairs. So he waved his hand majestically and said, upstairs, give me the best private room and the best dishes. The smile on the young lady's face froze. She paused and squeezed out a smile again. The upstairs is full. If you do not have a reservation, I can help you look downstairs. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu did not have any temper. This was not the place for him to be unreasonable, so he could only nod and acquiesce. The young lady quickly found an empty table in the crowded lobby for them. It was near the stairs to the 2nd floor. Although the location was not good, it was better than no place at all. Anyway, they were here for the food, so they did not care. After sitting down, the young lady asked what they wanted to order. Yu Qianqiu only said one thing, until the table was full of the best dishes. As expected of the best restaurant in Lost City, the service efficiency was very high. In a short while, the table was filled with all the dishes. Other than Immortal Lord Crocodile and Guan who still maintained their poise, everyone else at the table rolled up their sleeves and ate heartily. It seemed that they did not know if they would have the chance to come again after eating this time. Immortal Lord Crocodile was really cultured. After all, he was once one of the 12 great immortal lords in the celestial world. But Guan was not being gentlemanly. Instead, he looked at the table full of dishes with a frown. He was thinking about the terrible consequences if he did not have money to pay the bill later. The Heavenly Fragrance restaurant had a very deep background. Ordinary people could not afford to offend them, let alone natives like them. Bowley and the others were not nervous when faced with the food. They ate with their hands because they had never used chopsticks before. Yu Qianqiu pulled a piece of steak with both hands and bit into it. As he ate, he nodded at Immortal Lord Crocodile, indicating that it was delicious. He really did not expect that there would be such superb cooking in this sealed continent. The food here was so much better than outside. He even suspected that this was a culinary skill brought over from the celestial world. Little did he know that these people in besieged city were indeed very skilled in various industries, including cooking. Moreover, this was the best Heavenly Fragrance restaurant, so the taste was naturally not bad. The reason was simple. They were all trapped here, and there was not much they could do. All they could do was keep improving. All the customers in the lobby stared at the table of people eating, dumbfounded. They had never seen such a noble customer in such a high-class place like the Heavenly Fragrance restaurant. "Uncle, you must help us catch him." "Uncle, that person is very easy to recognize. He is a skinny and short aboriginal, different from the other aborigines in the city. Don't worry. Since he is such an obvious aboriginal, Uncle will definitely help you catch him." The two people who called him uncle earlier were obviously children's voices, and the deep and loud voice behind them was obviously an adult's. The sound of a group of people walking down the stairs came from upstairs. Yu Qianqiu and the others were at the table near the stairs, so they could clearly hear the voices of the people coming down. Yu Qianqiu, who was biting into his steak, suddenly felt that the voices of the two children were a little familiar. He could not help but look up. He saw a burly middle-aged man in armor holding a child in each hand as he walked down the stairs. Behind him were 6 soldiers in the same armor, each with a sword at their waist. As for the two children, they were strange. One of their faces was swollen, and one of their eyes was so swollen that they could not open them. They only had one eye left to look downstairs. The two individual single eyes suddenly froze at the same time. Their gazes collided with Yu Qianqiu's, unable to separate. Yu Qianqiu was speechless, and he cursed in his heart. He could only blame himself for being soft-hearted. If he had known earlier, he would have killed these two unlucky children. These two children were none other than the 2 bad children whom he had abducted and slapped unconscious in the alley earlier in the day. He did not expect to meet them here. Immortal Crocodile's gaze paused on the two children's swollen faces. He then supported his head with one hand and rubbed his temples with his fingers. He sighed in his heart. What a talent! Chapter 752. The commotion came from the stairs at the side. Bowley and the others were not blockheads, so they naturally took a look. When they saw the 2 pig-headed children, they felt that they were familiar, but they didn't think of the 2 hateful children during the day. However, Guan had stayed in the city for so many years, and his mind was more flexible. From the situation at the scene, he vaguely guessed something, and his heart was beating wildly. He recognized the person who was holding the 2 children and seemed to be the leader. It was Shang Huan, one of the 4 commanders of the city guards. The result was as bad as the people who knew what was going on expected. The 2 children almost simultaneously pointed at Yu Qianqiu, who was holding a stake, and screamed, "It's him, uncle, it's him who hit us." Shang Huan's sharp gaze suddenly stared at Yu Qianqiu. He had already noticed some clues from the skin color of these people, so he sneered and said, "What a group of sinister and cunning natives. They actually know how to disguise themselves. It's obvious that they're people with ulterior motives. Capture all of them." As soon as he gave the order, the 6 soldiers behind him immediately jumped down from the stairs and unsheathed their swords, surrounding the 7 natives in disguise. Such a situation immediately caused a commotion in the lobby of Heavenly Fragrance restaurant. Bowley and the others were simple but not stupid. At this moment, they naturally realized that the two children were the two bad children during the day. Everyone at the table stood up. Except for Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Crocodile, everyone else had a terrified expression. Shang Huan slowly walked down from the stairs. The two children waved their fists beside him and shouted, "Beat them to death, beat them to death." The commotion in the lobby alerted the shopkeeper. A chubby middle-aged man quickly walked out from the back and asked in a deep voice from afar, "What's going on?" After seeing Shang Huan, he was slightly startled and frowned. "So it's Commander Shang. Could it be that our Heavenly Fragrance restaurant didn't treat us well and provoked Commander Shang to make a move here?" From the tone of his voice, it was obvious that he was someone with a background. Shang Huan glanced at him and slowly walked to Yu Qianqiu, pulling off Yu Qianqiu's hat. The braids on his head immediately exposed Yu Qianqiu's identity as a native. Shang Huan casually threw away his hat and fiercely elbowed Yu Qianqiu's chest. Although a mere mortal commander had some skills, it was not enough to injure Yu Qianqiu. However, it was enough to make Yu Qianqiu furious, but he forced himself to hold it in. He even pretended to groan and stagger, holding the table behind him. At this time, Shang Huan turned to the fat shopkeeper and said, "Shopkeeper is worrying too much. It's not that I want to cause trouble, but I just happened to find a group of natives who committed a crime in the city during the day, and I'm about to arrest them." As he spoke, he gave his subordinates a look, and the 6 subordinates quickly pulled off the hats of Bolly and the others. The 7 native braids were exposed, and the lobby was filled with an uproar. The fat shopkeeper was slightly startled. Obviously, he didn't expect that there would be natives disguising themselves and eating in Heavenly Fragrance restaurant. He paused and said, "Commander Shang, I don't care who they are, but the rule of my Heavenly Fragrance restaurant is that anyone who comes here is a guest. You hid my guests in my Heavenly Fragrance restaurant, how can I put my face? Great Commander, I will go and apologize. I won't damage your Heavenly Fragrance restaurant's face." Shang Huan said indifferently, then turned to Yu Qianqiu and the others and said, "For the sake of Heavenly Fragrance restaurant, I don't want to use force on you here, but you'd better obediently go back with me. That way, you'll suffer less. If you dare to resist arrest, you'll have to bear the consequences." Then, with a wave of his hand, the 6 armed soldiers immediately threatened them with their sabers. Yu Qianqiu and the other bandits were also quite cooperative, and they were obediently escorted out. As soon as they left Heavenly Fragrance restaurant, under the bright night sky, there was a commotion in the crowd, and it immediately attracted passers-by to ask what happened. No matter what the 7 people had done, the locals in the city all looked at them with disdain, as if they couldn't wait to capture all the natives in the city. Meanwhile, the warriors of the various races had bitter expressions, and they more or less felt sorry for them. Bolly and the others were terrified, not knowing what the consequences of this matter would be. Immortal Crocodile's face, on the other hand, was gloomy. If it weren't for Yu Qianqiu, with his noble status, he wouldn't have to be paraded in public. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, whose head was lowered with his braids covering his face, he found that he had the potential to become a criminal. He couldn't help but sneer at him through telepathy. "Weren't you eating happily just now? Why are you so listless now? Cut the crap. You ate for free, so why are you still nagging?" Yu Qianqiu immediately retorted. Immortal Crocodile was speechless, regretting that he shouldn't have picked up his chopsticks. Lust City's public security had always been good, and it was rare to see such a scene. It was a night that had lost its passion day after day, but suddenly because of the arrest of the 7 people, a large number of people pointed at them, as if they were watching a show. When they passed by a clothing store, the store's owner, Huang Tian, was also attracted by the commotion outside. He got up from the chair at the door, lifted his feet, and stood on the chair, watching from above the passers-by. When he saw that the 7 people who were arrested were Yu Qianqiu and the others, who he had given the clothes to, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. What a coincidence! the 7 people were finally brought to the darkest corner in the west of the city, and there were no longer any spectators around. At the end of the road was a tall wall, and facing the intersection was an iron fence. The surroundings were quiet, and the atmosphere was somewhat oppressive. When the soldiers guarding the iron gate saw Shang Huan, they immediately saluted and opened the iron gate in the middle. Based on his experience, Yu Qianqiu judged that this should be Lost City's prison. Just as the crowd was about to enter the high wall, a soldier galloped over on horseback from behind, stopped in front of Shang Huan, and cupped his fists. "Commander Shang, the city lord has summoned you. He orders you to see him immediately." Shang Huan was slightly surprised, and after a pause, he nodded solemnly. Then, he waved his hand at the soldiers and said, "Take them to the prison, and wait for me to come and interrogate them personally tomorrow." The group obeyed, and the soldiers jumped down to invite him onto the horse. Shang Huan jumped onto the horse, turned around, and galloped away. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu meaningfully, because just when Shang Huan turned around, he saw with his own eyes Yu Qianqiu cut his fingertip and flicked a small drop of blood onto Shang Huan's back. He didn't know what trick this guy was playing. As soon as the 7 people entered the wall, they were immediately taken to the dungeon. After passing through a dark and damp tunnel, they were all chased into a dark underground stone room. The iron gate behind them clanked, and even the dim light in the tunnel disappeared. Now, they really couldn't see their own fingers in front of them. The underground stone room had a moldy smell, and they didn't know how long it had been since someone had been locked up. Bolly and the others couldn't see their surroundings clearly, and squeezed together in fear. They wanted to cry, but no tears came out. They had never experienced what it was like to be in prison. "Are you satisfied now?" Immortal Lord Crocodile's voice echoed in the stone room. "Of course. Guan's place is too small, and I was worried about not having a place to stay at night. Sigh. I can eat and sleep for free, and live a good life." Yu Qianqiu chuckled. Although the stone room was dark, with their cultivation, they had no problem seeing each other clearly within a short distance. His teasing laughter made Bolly and the others, who had been trembling with fear, relax a little. Bolly blankly looked around in the darkness and asked, "Yu Qianqiu, you hit. Can we still go out? Won't it implicate our people?" "Don't worry. It's okay, we'll be fine, and they'll let us go." Yu Qianqiu comforted him. These words made Bolly and the others feel more at ease, but Guan's face was bitter. He knew that it wouldn't be that simple. The stone room was empty, and the ground was damp. There wasn't even a place to sit. The others didn't see it, but Immortal Lord Crocodile did. Yu Qianqiu took out a large pile of dried straw and laid it on the ground. He then lay down and said to Bolly and the others, who didn't dare to move, with a smile, "Bolly, don't be nervous. Just walk forward, there's a place for you to sit." Bolly and the others had also heard the sound of him tossing the straw. They walked forward slowly, and when their feet touched the straw, they slowly squatted down and tried to feel it with their hands before sitting down. Once they sat down firmly, they felt more at ease. Immortal Lord Crocodile was stunned and speechless for a while. He then walked to Yu Qianqiu and sat down beside him. He transmitted his voice suspiciously. "You brat, you still have straw with you." He couldn't believe that someone would actually have straw in their storage bag. It was simply unimaginable. "You don't understand. This is called being prepared." Yu Qianqiu rested his head on his arms and crossed his legs, looking relaxed. In fact, these straws were casually gathered from the farmland in Utopia. "What are you trying to do, brat?" Immortal Lord Crocodile asked. He didn't think that this fellow was someone who would obediently surrender. Sure enough, Yu Qianqiu sneered and replied, "You dare to hit me? Wait and see." This was destined to be a sleepless night for the few of them. Although no one spoke, no one could fall asleep. It was late at night, and it was quiet outside. Only the sound of a few people tossing and turning on the straw could be heard. Yu Qianqiu quietly got up and placed a few silver balls on the ground. Then, he waved goodbye to Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was staring at him with wide eyes, and instantly disappeared. When he reappeared, Yu Qianqiu was dressed in black and his face was covered. He didn't know where he was. Under the hazy moonlight, he only knew that he was in a garden, surrounded by pavilions that were low-key and luxurious. It was obviously not the residence of an ordinary person. He guessed that this should be Commander Shang's home. The reason why he stayed up until midnight was to wait for the commander to return home to teach him a lesson. He didn't hit him for nothing. Yu Qianqiu hid in a patch of flowers and secretly poked his head out to look around. He happened to see a person walking out of a pavilion not far away. It was none other than Commander Shang. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. Without saying a word, a flying sword shot out with a whoosh. Shang Huan saw a cold light, and before he could react, his head was separated from his body. The remaining body and the flying head fell to the ground at the same time. "Who is it?" A loud shout came from the pavilion. Yu Qianqiu's vision blurred, and a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Yu Qianqiu, who was about to slip away, was slightly shocked when he saw who it was. This person was none other than the clothing store owner, Huang Tian, who had given him clothes for free on the streets previously. Chapter 753. It's you. Huang Tian slowly raised a black cloth in his hand and sneered, "I've always felt there was something wrong with a native like you. So you're a cultivator. Damn. He can recognize me even with my face covered." Yu Qianqiu felt the black cloth in his hand was familiar. He subconsciously touched his face and found that the black cloth covering his face was gone. He immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. The black cloth in the opponent's hand was clearly his mask. He didn't even know when the opponent took it away. If the opponent wanted to kill him just now, Yu Qianqiu immediately broke out in a cold sweat. He didn't dare to think any further. He knew his actions today were too rash. The cultivators of the celestial world had an undeserved reputation. They weren't people he could deal with. With this scare, he completely calmed down. His experience of 2 lifetimes of being fearless in the face of danger came into play at this crucial moment. He wasn't in a hurry to leave now. Since the opponent didn't kill him just now, if he was in the opponent's shoes, he would definitely want to know the assassin's background, so his life wasn't in danger for now. Also, since he had already revealed his face, if he ran away, he wouldn't be able to establish himself in Lost Soil City. Then all his efforts would be wasted. "Huang Tian, aren't you selling clothes? Why are you here?" Yu Qianqiu asked in shock. Just as he finished speaking, there were already many footsteps running over, clearly attracted by the commotion here. Huang Tian's gaze flickered as he stared at Yu Qianqiu. He suddenly shouted, "All of you, back down." His voice shook the surroundings. People immediately replied, "Yes, City Lord." The dense footsteps retreated. "City Lord." Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank and his gaze turned cold. "You're Lost Soil City's City Lord." Although it was an unintentional question, it was no different from asking the obvious. Huang Tian glanced at Shang Huan's corpse on the ground and let go of the black cloth in his hand. He said expressionlessly, "You're not a tribe native, nor a celestial cultivator, but a human cultivator. Just who are you?" Yu Qianqiu immediately gave him a thumbs up. "City Lord Huang has good eyesight." "That's right, I'm a human cultivator." Huang Tian narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Human cultivators? There is no place for cultivators in the mortal world on this continent. So, you came in from the outside world when the Heaven and Earth Grand Formation was opened?" "Yes and no." Yu Qianqiu gave an ambiguous answer. Huang Tian's eyes suddenly narrowed, and he said in a low voice, "A mere cultivator of the mortal world has quite the guts to actually barge into the city governor's estate to kill someone. Could it be that you're not afraid of death? This is the city lord's mansion." Yu Qianqiu looked around and felt a little depressed. He had purposely waited until late at night because he wanted to wait for Shang Huan to return home so that he could make his move. He didn't expect Shang Huan to stay until now. His judgment was wrong. If I knew this was the city lord's mansion, I wouldn't have come. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. Huang Tian snorted coldly and didn't ask why he killed Shang Huan. He waved his sleeve, and the ground under his feet surged like waves. A few huge mud palms suddenly stretched out of the ground and hugged Shang Huan's body, swallowing it into the ground. Then, the ground returned to normal, and not even a trace of blood could be seen. What kind of spell was this? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Huang Tian turned to leave, and as he walked, he said, "Follow me, don't think about escaping, or else you'll end up like Shang Huan's body." Yu Qianqiu consciously nodded and followed Huang Tian. When he passed by the place where Shang Huan was buried, it still felt a little surreal. He couldn't help but step on the ground to make sure it was solid. Huang Tian, who was walking in front, couldn't help but twitch. It seemed that this kid really wasn't afraid. Walking to a remote part of the garden, Yu Qianqiu, who was following behind, suddenly found that the ground in front of him was empty, and there was suddenly a big black hole. Huang Tian walked in neither too fast nor too slow. Yu Qianqiu was stunned again as he stood at the entrance of the cave. He saw that the soil in the cave was constantly retracting as the yellow sky moved forward, forming a 3-meter-wide cave. The depth of the cave continued to extend underground. This scene was simply too magical. Huang Tian seemed to be the ruler of the earth. Wherever he went, the earth had to make way. Just as Yu Qianqiu was in a daze, he suddenly realized that his center of gravity was a little unstable. The ground beneath his feet seemed to be moving, and he was shocked when he looked around. It was as if he was standing on the conveyor belt of an elevator, bringing him deep underground. The soil behind him suddenly closed, and the starry sky suddenly disappeared. He had been buried alive in the soil. "Huang Tian, what are you trying to do?" Yu Qianqiu said warily. He could barely see Huang Tian's figure in the darkness. "Don't be afraid. If I wanted to kill you, I would have done it long ago. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Don't worry, follow me. I have something to ask you," Huang Tian said calmly as he continued going deeper. This consolation did not make Yu Qianqiu let his guard down. In just a short while, he estimated that he had already gone more than 100 meters deep. Yu Qianqiu tried to communicate with Utopia and realized that there was no obstruction. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said, "If you have something to ask me, why don't you ask me where I am? Why do you have to go deep underground?" "I naturally have secrets to ask when I go deep underground." Huang Tian, who was advancing forward, stopped and suddenly waved his hand to scatter a large number of fluorescent stones. The surrounding terrain instantly changed, retreating with the fluorescent stones and expanding the underground space, changing into various shapes. Yu Qianqiu was already attracted by this magical spell. When he realized that the ground that was bringing him forward had stopped, his vision suddenly opened up. He saw that an underground palace had formed in just a short while. It was an earthen yellow underground palace. Under the illumination of the fluorescent stones embedded in the surroundings, the entire underground palace could be seen. There were earthen yellow stairs, various earthen yellow sculptures, and earthen yellow tables and chairs. Huang Tian was sitting behind a table in front of him. He pointed at the chair next to him and said with a faint smile, "There's no need to look anymore. Come and sit. I have something to ask you." Yu Qianqiu wasn't in a hurry to reply. He strolled around the palace, knocked on it, and touched it. He noticed that everything was lifelike as if it was made by the heavens, and he couldn't help but click his tongue in admiration. After satisfying his curiosity, he walked over with large strides and sat opposite of Huang Tian before clapping and praising. As expected of an immortal from the immortal dimension, your methods are truly miraculous. Huang Tian smiled and said, "It's just a small trick. It's just that you haven't seen it before. It's just that I'm proficient in the earth elemental arts. There's nothing magical about it." As he spoke, he took out 2 sets of wine utensils from his storage bracelet and placed them on the table. 2 earthen yellow hands immediately stretched out from the table. If it wasn't for the difference in color, their lifelike appearance could be passed off as genuine. One of the 2 hands took out a cup and the other a pot and moved in front of Yu Qianqiu to pour wine. After filling up the wine cup was placed in front of Yu Qianqiu. The 2 earthen yellow hands disappeared into the table. The wine utensils in front of Huang Tian were the same. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.